Chapter 89. The first week of October was fairly ordinary for Hogwarts, at least at the start. Harry went to bed late on Friday night, following a meeting that ended with him and Draco spending some time alone in the room. Exhausted, he collapsed onto his mattress, looking forward to a long rest before diving into a weekend filled with essays. He certainly wasn't expecting to be jolted awake at 4 a.m. by an unusual, persistent kind of magic. His hand instinctively went to his scar, a wave of alarm washing over him before he remembered that it had been dormant for quite some time. This magic felt different. It didn't put him on edge. Instead, it was welcoming, yet it had an impatient quality. It seemed to need him for something. With a knot of trepidation in his stomach, Harry pulled back his curtains and swung his legs over the edge of his bed, only to freeze. Neville stood in the middle of the darkened room, pulling a dressing gown over his pajamas. Both boys stared at each other wide-eyed. Do you feel it too?" Harry asked tentatively. Neville blinked, then nodded. "What is it?" he asked. Harry shook his head, slipping his feet into slippers. No idea. The rest of their dorm mates appeared completely oblivious, Ron's snores drifting through his feeble attempt at a silencing charm. Bewildered, with wands in hand, Harry and Neville crept down the stairs. The common room was empty, and their frowns deepened. The magic continued to push on Harry like a guiding hand on his shoulder, urging him to leave Gryffindor Tower. He followed, though his gaze remained wary. Once in the corridor, the magic directed him to turn right. The feeling of intent intensified. It was almost excited. A memory flickered through his mind, a conversation with Salazar at the beginning of the year. The castle is keen. Was that what was happening? But what was the castle keen for? What's this all for? And what do Neville and I have to do with it? Harry's shoulders relaxed slightly as he realized that the magic was coming from Hogwarts itself. It wouldn't hurt them, but where was it leading them? They both froze at the sound of footsteps, spinning around to see Hannah Abbott creeping toward them. She was also in pajamas, wearing an oversized black jumper with the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, wand raised high. She tensed upon spotting them, but then relaxed, eyeing them with suspicion. "What's happening?" she asked. "No idea. Did the magic bring you up here?" Neville replied. Hannah nodded, her cheeks flushing slightly. "It sounds weird, doesn't it? But I just felt like something needed me to be up here." "Not weird at all," Harry assured her. The two boys flanked her, and the trio continued walking. Harry realized they were headed to the Room of Requirement, just a turn away. His exhausted brain whirred frantically to figure out what was happening. Then he spotted Luna waiting outside the door to the room, and a suspicion began to grow. "Luna?" Neville greeted, perplexed. "Are you the one who summoned us here?" The blonde girl smiled, shaking her head. Her eyes seemed to almost glow in the dim moonlight. "No, it wasn't me." "But you know why we're here," Harry presumed, feeling it now, with the four of them standing together. That pressure in his chest, the surge of magic in his veins. Family magic. Slytherin magic. Luna's smile turned knowing. "So do you." "Well, I don't," Hannah interjected impatiently. "So if you'd care to share—" Harry turned to her and Neville, quietly surprised. He half expected Luna to be hiding a secret Ravenclaw bloodline connection. She was appropriately mysterious and ethereal for that. Neville, too, had some extent of connection. The Longbottoms had been rumoured to be linked to Gryffindor's line. Hannah was an unexpected surprise. "It's your birthday today, isn't it, Hannah?" Harry asked, making her blink in surprise. Yes. I felt my magic surge about an hour ago." He smiled slightly. "Looks like the castle is eager for a shake-up," he he mused. It was growing impatient, practically screaming in his head for him to open the door to the room. He reached for the handle, pushed it open, and stepped back. "After you, Lady Hufflepuff," he said softly, his gaze fixed on Hannah. She gasped, and Neville echoed her surprise. "How did you—" Hannah trailed off as she stepped through the door. As Harry followed her inside, ensuring that Neville and Luna were close behind, his breath caught in his throat. The castle had led them to the Wardstone. It was nothing like any Wardstone he had seen before, not that he had seen many, just the ones at Pottery and Grimmauld. But the Hogwarts Wardstone was easily twice the size of either of those. A perfect crystal sphere sat on a stone pedestal, shining with internal lights, blue, red, green and yellow, all dancing around each other, pulsing with the faint rhythm of the castle's magic. It felt like the heartbeat of Hogwarts. "This shouldn't be possible," Neville murmured, astonished. "Hannah's the only one of us who's of age." "When things become necessary, the castle has ways of speeding up the inheritance process," Luna declared, her voice taking on that strange other tone. Harry looked up, hopeful, but she shook her head at him. "Not for the rest of your family magics, only Slytherin." She sounded apologetic. She understood how important it was for Harry to reach his full potential quickly. "Slytherin?" Hannah repeated, staring at Harry in disbelief. Harry nodded. "Conquering heir," he confirmed, turning his attention back to the Wardstone, feeling the magic wash over him like a tidal wave. "Looks like it's time for us to take up our duties." It was the first time in centuries that Hogwarts needed its heirs, and of course it was him. Of course it was now. As if he needed anything else to make him special. What do we do?" Neville asked, taking a half-step closer. Harry wondered if he felt the call too, the urge to press his hands against the Wardstone and just surrender to it. "We answer the call," Luna replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "But we must do it all together." No one argued. Within moments, the four of them stood around the Wardstone, positioned at the four cardinal points, where they felt the energy of the castle hum with satisfaction. A strong sense of déjà vu washed over Harry, but it wasn't his own memories he recalled. It was Salazar himself, and all the Hogwarts heirs who had come before. All the Slytherin-blooded witches and wizards who had once stood in this very spot, lending their magic to the castle and drawing magic in return. Each of them raised their dominant hand and in unison pressed it against the surprisingly warm surface of the Wardstone. Immediately, Harry's spine stiffened as a powerful rush surged through him. At first, it was a jumbled clash of magic and sensation that made him dizzy. But as it began to intertwine with his own, the feeling settled. That was when he realized just how desperate the wards were. It hurt his heart to feel such incredible protections languishing. Huge holes ripped through the tight weave, patched clumsily by a somewhat recent magic. Certain aspects pulsed with power, while others were utterly neglected. Dumbledore had been manipulating the school wards for his own gains for decades. The castle knew what it wanted. Harry was merely a vessel. His magic reached for the threads of emerald green energy within the stone, the color pooling beneath his fingertips inside the crystal. In his mind's eye, he could see the wards beginning to rebuild themselves. The protections keeping dangerous creatures out of the school were reforming, and the wards that would alert the staff to students in need were coming back to life. As the magic surged around them, Harry felt a sense of urgency fill the air once more. So many aspects of Hogwarts had been overlooked for so long that most people alive had likely forgotten they ever existed. He realized that none of the trials Dumbledore had put him through during his years at Hogwarts would have been possible if the wards had been at full strength. Now, as he delved deeper into the wards, he understood that their decline hadn't begun with Dumbledore's ascension to headmaster. It likely started long before that, during Grindelwald's rise to power, when Dumbledore was merely a transfiguration teacher. Had he done something back then to disrupt the ward's connection with the actual headmaster? Had he begun seeking power even at such an early stage? Had he started to supplement his own strength with the magic of the Hogwarts wards? It was becoming increasingly clear that this was precisely what Dumbledore had been doing for decades. With the abundance of ambient magic around the students, not to mention the natural magic of the land on which Hogwarts was built, it shouldn't have been possible for the wards to weaken so drastically without the magic being diverted elsewhere. That was why the founders had chosen this spot to build Hogwarts. That was why their family magics were so unique and intricately woven into the fabric of the castle. The founders had poured so much of themselves into it, living within its walls while the magic was still young and volatile. This connection had transformed their family magics into something unlike anything seen elsewhere, interconnected and far more sentient than any other magic discovered to date. As the magic intertwined with the four of them, it pulled the wards away from Dumbledore, linking them to those of the Founder's blood. A wave of panic washed over Harry as he wondered if Dumbledore might notice. But the castle offered him comfort, a flicker of mischief dancing across his skin. Everything would be fine. With their power flowing through Hogwarts and the wards finally allowed to thrive again, the castle would take care of everything. The heirs just needed to protect themselves and safeguard the school from Dumbledore and others like him. They could have been there for hours, lost in their connection to the magic of the castle. Days turned into a blur as Harry immersed himself in the castle's magic, his mind awakening to a level of awareness he had never experienced before. It was the kind of awareness a headmaster was meant to possess, an understanding of the students and their safety, of the ghosts, the elves, the lake, and the forest. It was the kind of awareness that ensured student protection, something that had been sorely lacking during Dumbledore's tenure at Hogwarts. At last the magic began to flow back into the Wardstone, and Harry was able to pull his hand away. Yet that awareness lingered in the back of his mind, patiently waiting for him to call upon it. Hogwarts was there, ready and waiting. It didn't feel like the oppressive foreign magic he had encountered before. It wasn't his own, but it intertwined with him effortlessly. It felt like an extension of the magic from his Slytherin heritage, magics that were now fully awakened and coursing through him, as if he were of age, even though his other family magics lay dormant. "Wow," Hannah said softly, pulling him back to the present. Harry glanced at his friends, noticing how they stood a little taller, their eyes shining, their faces flushed with newfound strength. They felt empowered, and they felt like family. "The wards were so broken," Neville said, his voice filled with horror. "He let them get that way. He made them that way." Harry shared in Neville's disgust. Now that he understood all that the Hogwarts wards were supposed to provide, it was unfathomable that Dumbledore had allowed them to deteriorate. It wasn't just about sneaking dangerous artifacts and creatures into the school. The wards were ancient, not bound by the same notions of light and dark that prevail today. They were meant to ensure that students couldn't seriously harm one another or themselves. How many injuries could have been prevented if the wards had been functioning properly? How many instances of abuse? He wasn't naive enough to believe those things didn't happen. How many lives had been lost in the last 70 years? Could that have been avoided? Harry thought, feeling a wave of sickness wash over him. His reign is over, Luna declared softly. The school is ours now. Harry reached out, placing one hand on Luna's shoulder and the other on Hannah's. Opposite him, Neville mirrored the gesture, and soon the girls joined in until all four of them were huddled together around the glowing Wardstone. This is going to turn the whole world upside down once word gets out, Hannah mused, a smirk creeping onto her face as she laughed quietly. Susan is going to flip, Harry snorted. Yes, the future Chief Warlock would certainly have a lot to say about the Founders' seats being active for the first time since the 18th century, once it was safe to go to the Ministry and claim them, that is. We should keep it a secret for now, he suggested. No one will know what's happened. Even Dumbledore won't understand the truth. Harry felt his connection to the wards had changed, but he knew Dumbledore wouldn't grasp why. The castle would protect them. It's an advantage we can't afford to give away. You're right, Neville agreed, but, blimey, I never expected this. Harry hadn't either, though he probably should have given his track record. When they finally pulled themselves away from the Wardstone, they headed toward the door. But as they stepped out, a powerful surge of gratitude hit them, leaving them breathless. Hogwarts was so pleased to have heirs again. The school was ready to fight, and now, with them at the wards, they might actually win. Breakfast should have been unbearable, considering how little sleep they had gotten. After saying goodbye to the girls, Harry and Neville had returned to their dorms, so wired from the influx of magic that the sun was already creeping over the horizon by the time they finally fell asleep. Yet, Harry woke at the usual time, feeling refreshed and invigorated, more so than he had in weeks, honestly. Neville, too, seemed bright-eyed. Harry bounded into the great hall, bushy-tailed and full of energy. He greeted Ginny with a hug so tight that it lifted her off her feet for a moment. She squealed in surprise, laughing as she glanced at her boyfriend, clearly puzzled. "Someone's in a good mood," she said, looking at Harry for an explanation, but he simply grinned back at her. As they made their way to their seats, Harry couldn't help but chuckle at the sight of Hannah at the Hufflepuff table. She was wearing a ridiculous hat shaped like a birthday cake, complete with charmed candles that flickered on top. When she noticed them, she beamed widely, her brown eyes sparkling with mischief. At the Ravenclaw table, Luna was chatting happily with Sully, practically glowing with energy. But that was typical for Luna, so no one seemed to think twice about it. Feeling a little smug, Harry glanced up at the head table. For once, Dumbledore was present, though he looked a bit grey in the face, nursing a cup of tea, while a half-eaten slice of toast lay neglected on his plate. Harry imagined it must be painful for Dumbledore to be cut off from a source of magic he had shamelessly abused for decades. As Harry took his seat, he caught the headmaster's gaze and instinctively raised his occlumency shields against any intrusion, quickly shifting his eyes away. Dumbledore scowled slightly behind his beard, but Harry chose to ignore him. Reaching for a plate of sausages, he thought about how the headmaster could glare suspiciously all he wanted. He wouldn't discover the truth about the previous night. Harry couldn't help but smile to himself, wondering what Dumbledore would do if he learned who else had played a part in cutting him out of the Hogwarts wards. He contemplated how long it might take the old man to figure it out, especially with the castle itself shrouding the truth. Dumbledore probably thought it was just more side effects from the curse that was slowly ravaging his body. He might never know. At least, not until he tried to draw more magic or manipulate the wards again, only to find them completely out of his reach. In the back of his mind, Hogwarts seemed to be laughing. Naturally, the first person Harry sought out after breakfast, if you could call him a person, was Salazar. The moment Salazar laid eyes on him, he smiled wider than Harry had ever seen before. "You knew this was going to happen," Harry accused, and Salazar chuckled. "I did not know when," he admitted, "but I could feel the change coming. Even as a portrait, my magic is connected to the castle." His dark eyes fixed knowingly on Harry. "It feels good, doesn't it?" Harry flopped down on the sofa, letting out a long breath. "It feels amazing," he replied honestly, running a hand through his hair. "Is this what my full adult power will feel like?" The thought of that much magic coursing through his veins was exhilarating. Killing Voldemort would feel as easy as swatting a fly. "Not quite. Your Slytherin magic is strengthened by the connection to the castle. Your other family magics won't have that. But the boost is quite similar, always elevated for the first 48 hours. It's a good thing it's a weekend, or you'd have a lot of explaining to do when you cast spells in class." Harry grimaced slightly, realizing he needed to keep his power under control before Monday's classes began. "Can I pour that extra magic back into the wards?" he asked. "I don't need it, not now, and the wards have been lacking for so long." His voice held a hint of despair. The idea of Dumbledore binding and warping the castle's magic struck too close to home for Harry. Salazar's eyes were sympathetic as he stroked his pet snake's head, leaning back in his chair. "Of all the heirs I have met in recent centuries, I am most glad this power has found you, Harry," he said solemnly. "Often the ambition of a Slytherin can become warped, surpassing their own good sense. It gladdens me to see you care more for this school's well-being than your own." "Your own magical ability," Salazar said with a sad, wistful smile. "Dear Hogwarts does so much for the magical youth of this country. It deserves to have such a steadfast champion." Harry felt his cheeks warm, a surge of happiness swelling in his chest. "Hogwarts was the first place I ever truly called home," he replied softly. "It deserves better than what it has become under Dumbledore's thumb." He was determined to see it improve, even if it cost him dearly. "It certainly does," Salazar agreed, his smile shifting to one of pride as he looked down at Harry. "Come, tell me about the other heirs. I can only assume they share your devotion to this school, especially now that Hogwarts has decided to awaken you all. I'm curious to know which families carry my friends' legacies." Then Salazar smirked, that familiar Slytherin cunning returning. "If you have no pressing engagements, I shall teach you how to properly utilize your new connection to the wards, for the castle's benefit and your own." Harry grinned, settling in more comfortably. His homework could wait. Carrying even a fraction of the wards of Hogwarts took some getting used to for all 4 heirs. Despite Salazar's guidance, Harry struggled not to accidentally draw from the wards, or concentrate too hard on trying to feel them. It was exhausting to maintain a low-level awareness of the entire school in the back of his mind. Yet already the castle felt different, stronger, happier. The students seemed to sense it too, even if they couldn't explain why. Dumbledore certainly noticed, as evidenced by the thinly veiled confusion on his face. The Hogwarts heirs were adapting. Salazar reassured them that it would become easier when they all turned 17 and their magical cores fully developed. For now, it was a bit of a strain, but the castle would do its best to ease that burden. Either way, it was just another oddity in their ever-evolving journey. Harry had a lot to adjust to. By the first Hogsmeade weekend at the end of October, he felt a mix of desperation to leave the castle and terror at the thought of doing so. He wasn't entirely sure how their connection to Hogwarts would hold up outside its walls, even though Salazar had reassured him that everything would be fine. After all, the wards weren't meant to keep them trapped within the castle. "It'll be fine," Neville said optimistically as they made their way to breakfast, both dressed for a day in the village. "Come on, Harry, you've been looking forward to this for ages. Hannah and I are staying here, so it'll be fine." He was right, and deep down Harry knew it. Pushing his anxiety aside, he managed to smile and nodded tightly. Neville grinned and gently bumped Harry's shoulder. "Stop being such a control freak," he teased, prompting Harry to stick out his tongue in response. He wasn't a control freak. He just tended to be at the center of trouble and preferred to stay on top of things when it happened. Still, he kept quiet, unsure if Neville would understand his perspective. As they reached the entrance hall, Harry felt a bit more spring in his step, reminded of why he had been so excited for the Hogsmeade weekend. Draco stood near the doors, 2 wrapped sandwiches in hand, his Slytherin scarf snug around his neck to ward off the late October chill. His grey eyes were striking against the dark green wool, sending a tingle down Harry's spine. "I'll see you later then," Neville said, amusement in his tone. Harry snapped back to the moment, warmth creeping into his cheeks. Neville just laughed. "Be careful out there. Remember, you're just friends, yeah?" Harry scowled lightly. "We'll be fine," he insisted. "See you at dinner." They parted ways, and Harry walked over to Draco's side, offering him a grin. "Morning," he greeted, taking one of the sandwiches from his boyfriend. It was still warm, carefully wrapped to keep the bacon and fillings intact. "Eggs wouldn't fall out," Harry said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "Thanks. Didn't feel like eating breakfast in the hall this morning." Draco shrugged, falling into step beside Harry as they headed out onto the grounds, huddled close against the freezing wind sweeping across the landscape. "I'll take any excuse to skip sitting in that damned hall these days," he replied, his eyes darkening. Harry hummed in sympathy. He understood the feeling. With everyone staring at him as if he were about to crack, Dumbledore's suspicious gaze lingering on him, and the looming threat of those ominous black envelopes, Harry was getting tired of mealtimes at Hogwarts too. The boys ate as they walked, joining the steady stream of students heading down to the village. Even now, nearly 2 months into term, they received strange looks just for being together, for being friendly. Harry tried his best to ignore the eyes on him, focusing instead on enjoying his time with Draco. When they finally reached Hogsmeade, it was quieter than usual, not only because many students had seen the temperature outside and decided to skip the weekend. Zonko's joke shop was boarded up, and they weren't the only ones. It seemed that even the village's proximity to the school wasn't enough to make people feel safe. "Or Zonko's has gone under because the twins are putting them out of business," Draco remarked when Harry mentioned the shop's closure, making Harry blink. "That quickly? You think so?" "From what Blaise has told me about how business was going over the summer, it wouldn't surprise me," Draco mused, shrugging. Of course, Zonko's had, or rather had, the upper hand with a physical presence so close to the school, but the twins got so good at sneaking our orders under Umbridge's nose last year. Their customers don't have to worry about deliveries getting caught. Harry smirked to himself, knowing the twins were still paying Dobby a small fee to deliver within the castle. Maybe they can buy out Zonko's and open a second shop here. Blaise would certainly like that, Draco agreed, mirroring Harry's expression. Harry chuckled. "As if George living in Diagon is stopping those two from meeting up," he said, shaking his head. He knew the redhead was likely somewhere in the village, or maybe had already sneaked into the school to see his beau, especially given the terrible weather. A particularly strong gust of icy wind made Harry shiver, prompting him to lean a bit closer to Draco. He had to resist the urge to wrap an arm around the blonde's waist for warmth. They couldn't do that in public. As far as everyone else at school was concerned, they were just friends. Yet, with each passing day, Harry found himself caring less about keeping that secret. People gossiped about him enough already. Why not add one more thing to the list? Fortunately, while Zonko's was closed, Honeyduke's was open. The two hurried over to take refuge from the cold, as even warming charms couldn't do much against the biting wind. Harry let out a quiet sigh as they squeezed into the already crowded shop, greeted by a blast of warmth. Beside him, he felt Draco relax ever so slightly. "Maybe we should have stayed in the castle," Harry joked under his breath. It seemed like half the students visiting the village had sought refuge inside the warm, delicious-smelling shop. There was hardly room to move, let alone browse the shelves for treats. "Harry, my boy!" The cheerful call made Harry's heart sink. It was Slughorn, bundled up in a furry hat and coat, clutching a box of crystallized pineapple. "Good to see you out and about. I was starting to think you spent all your time on the Quidditch pitch these days, or in detention." Slughorn chuckled at his own joke. "You keep missing my little suppers. I'll have to have a word with Severus if he keeps this up. I'm sure you don't deserve half the detentions he gives you. Or do you only behave in my classes?" Slughorn chuckled again, and Harry forced a smile, echoing the sound. "Some classes are easier to behave in than others," he joked, earning a wink from Slughorn. "Quite right, quite right. Not to worry, I'll get you eventually. How about Monday night? You can't possibly be out playing Quidditch in this weather." Harry knew he wouldn't be able to escape this invitation, especially since he'd been scheduling Quidditch practices to clash with Slughorn's little gatherings. He couldn't even use the HA as an excuse. Slughorn didn't know it existed, and Harry preferred to keep it that way. "Monday night it is, sir," he confirmed, trying to sound more enthusiastic than he felt. "Excellent," Slughorn beamed, giving Harry a friendly clap on the shoulder. "Good to hear it, lad. Now, I suppose I'd best let you get on with your day. I'm sure you'd rather chat with your friends than your old potions professor." He peered around as if expecting Harry to be hiding a group of adoring fans behind a shelf, then blinked at Draco as if he had just noticed him. "Mr. Malfoy, I had no idea the two of you were, friends outside the classroom." Harry stifled a snicker. If only Slughorn knew. "Draco and I have been friends for ages, sir," he replied with a smile. "Slytherins and Gryffindors do get along on occasion. I'm sure you'll agree that their reputation isn't always deserved. You were a Slytherin, weren't you, sir?" He remembered Snape mentioning that Slughorn had been his head of house back in the day. "Indeed I was," Slughorn confirmed with a slightly awkward chuckle. "Many years ago, mind you. The inter-house rivalry wasn't quite what it is now back in my day. Still, a little friendly competition never hurt anyone, eh?" Harry would argue that the current view of Slytherin House was more than just friendly competition, but he remained silent. Harry was trying to get on Slughorn's good side, so he laughed. "As long as we don't start talking about Quidditch, we'll be fine," he said, casually slinging an arm around Draco's shoulders. Slughorn's gaze followed the movement, and Harry wondered what he was thinking. Did he see this as a sign of Harry sinking further into darkness, or as him playing the saviour and redeeming someone once thought irredeemable? Slughorn stuttered out a few more platitudes before squeezing past them and leaving the shop. Once he was gone, Draco let out a quiet noise of disgust. "I'm so glad I don't have to deal with those suppers of his," he muttered derisively. "You should be," Harry agreed, reluctantly dropping his arm from Draco's shoulders when a pair of Hufflepuff girls eyed them strangely. He was probably being too obvious, practically pressed against Draco's back as they surveyed a display of fudge, but he didn't care. He was hanging out with his boyfriend in public, even if they were pretending to be just friends. It was more than he could have hoped for last year, for sure. "Has he told you anything useful yet?" Draco asked, reaching for some dark chocolate and cherry fudge. He then grabbed a packet of the chocolate orange flavor, flashing a quick grin at Harry before tucking it in with his own purchases, even though they both knew it was for Harry. Harry smiled back, momentarily forgetting the question. "What? Oh, not really." Snape was convinced that Slughorn had to know something important, that there was a reason Dumbledore had brought him back to the castle. But if there was, he was keeping it close to his chest. Then again, Harry was struggling to find a non-suspicious way to ask for information about Tom Riddle, so perhaps he just hadn't found the right questions yet. It was tough, especially knowing the lies Dumbledore may have filled the man's head with. "Maybe if I stop skiving off. Maybe after a few suppers he'll warm up to me a bit," Harry admitted, causing Draco to snort. Yes, that would help. With all their layers of clothing, it was starting to feel a little too warm in the shop. The crowd was pushing them so close together that Harry found it increasingly difficult not to settle a hand on Draco's hip or brush a kiss across his temple. They wrestled their way to the till and had a brief but silent argument about Draco paying for all of Harry's sweets, which, of course, Draco won. Afterward, they braced themselves with more warming charms before heading back out into the street. It was jarringly quiet compared to what they were used to in Hogsmeade. The street was practically empty. No one lingered, heads down as they hurried to their next shop. Harry doubted the weather was entirely to blame. The only people who weren't rushing to get out of the open were the guards patrolling the village. Harry grinned at the sight of Kingsley leaning against a lamppost, wrapped in heavy robes and a wool hat covering his bald head. "Hey, Kings!" he greeted cheerfully as he approached the man. Kingsley straightened up, nodding in acknowledgement. "Harry, Mr. Malfoy." He had to pretend he hadn't seen Draco dozens of times over the summer. People weren't supposed to know how involved he was with Harry's true family. "Enjoying the weather?" he asked wryly. Harry snorted. "Hardly. How long have you been out here?" The man must have been freezing. "Since 8, the Aura, or was it ex-Aura technically, since he couldn't go to the Ministry without being killed, replied with a shrug. "I'll switch with Vance in an hour or so. Can't see the students staying long today." "You're only here for the Hogsmeade weekend, then?" Draco asked, but Kingsley shook his head. "Oh no, Albus has a constant guard in the village, just to keep an eye on things. And we've increased security while the students are around. Tonks is somewhere nearby, and Fletcher was supposed to be on guard too, but I'm pretty sure he took off a while ago. He was complaining about frostbite." Kingsley rolled his eyes, and Harry scowled. He still hadn't met Mundungus Fletcher in person, and hoped to keep it that way. "Typical," he muttered derisively. "What are you boys up to, then?" Kingsley asked, his dark eyes shifting pointedly between them. Both boys flushed beneath their scarves. "Just out and about, taking a break from the castle. Not that this is much better," Harry replied, turning to glare at a pair of fourth-years who were whispering a bit too loudly about him as they passed. Kingsley frowned. "Yes, Sirius mentioned you've been having some trouble," he murmured. "It's nothing I can't handle," Harry assured him. "Just gossip, the usual." "But the headmaster isn't helping," Draco interjected, his expression darkening. "He's watching you like you're about to start throwing unforgivables around the Great Hall." "I can handle it," Harry insisted stubbornly. "Wish you didn't have to, kid," Kingsley sighed, shaking his head slightly. "But you're doing all right otherwise? all things considered? His gaze was intense. There were so many things Harry didn't dare write in letters, and he wasn't sure how much Sirius shared. Those same topics were far too sensitive to discuss in the middle of Hogsmeade, and they both knew it. "Doing fine," Harry assured him. "Keeping my head down, my grades up, all that jazz." He flashed a cheeky grin, and Kingsley chuckled. "Glad to hear it. Look after yourselves, both of you. Now get out of this bloody cold. Just because I have to stand here freezing to death doesn't mean you need to join me." His voice was jovial, but he kept scanning the street, noticing the curious stares from students. Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy stood talking to a strange adult. He was right. They should get inside and try to pretend to be normal students for a little while longer. "Give the rest our love," Harry said quietly. Kingsley nodded and bid them goodbye. The two boys turned away, wincing at the bitter sting of the wind against their cheeks. "3 broomsticks," Draco suggested, already heading toward the pub. Harry smirked. "Not puddyfoots," he teased, earning a scowl from Draco. "You couldn't pay me enough to go in there." Harry laughed, the sound ringing through the quiet street and drawing even more strange looks from passers-by. People seemed surprised that Draco could elicit such a bright sound from him. They didn't know Draco like Harry did. The 3 broomsticks was just as busy as they expected, but there was enough space for them to squeeze in at the bar and order a couple of butterbeers. Harry ended up pressed against Draco from hip to ankle, trying to avoid being jostled by the crowd. He stopped himself a dozen times from putting his hand somewhere inappropriate for mere friendship. Merlin, pretending to be friends was even more exhausting than pretending to hate each other sometimes. Honestly, Remus was quite surprised that he and Sirius were still invited to order meetings. The atmosphere in the burrow was tense. Albus had moved the meeting to the Weasley house when it became clear that Sirius wasn't going to rescind his ban against Molly in the Grimmauld wards. Molly seemed equally displeased about having to let Sirius into her house, especially since he and Charlie made no effort to hide their relationship in front of her. He wondered how Albus couldn't see the divide within his own people. Was he truly that blind, or had he stopped caring? Did he think he was so close to defeating Voldemort by himself that the rest of them no longer mattered? The old man seemed more evasive than ever these days. Severus was right to worry. About his plans, whatever they were, he wasn't sharing them with the Order, and that was concerning. "Now, I trust everything in Hogsmeade went as planned?" Albus asked, after Joseph Hawthorne finished his report on the Ministry. That was another issue. Over the past few months, Albus had brought more people into the Order, individuals the rest of them hardly knew. He claimed it was necessary because all his previous Ministry informants were out of work, which was true, but Remus wasn't sure he fully trusted these newcomers. "Quiet as a mouse," Kingsley confirmed. "Clearly the Death Eaters didn't want to be out in that cold any more than we did." A few chuckles circulated around the table, but Albus's lips only twitched briefly. "Glad to hear it. Although I heard several students mention that Harry had been talking to strangers in the village." "He stopped to chat for a moment," Kingsley replied, his expression as impassive as ever. "Him and the Malfoy lad." "What did he ask about?" Albus pressed. "Nothing in particular. Just wanted to say hello and ask how everyone was doing outside the castle. Like I said, he only stopped for a moment." "He said hi to me in the 3 broomsticks," Tonks volunteered. "But there weren't any free seats, so they left after one drink." "Just him and the Malfoy boy?" Moody asked suspiciously, his bright blue eye fixed on Tonks. "Didn't meet any of his other friends there?" "Not that I saw." Moody's lips thinned. "The boys headed down a dangerous path." "The Malfoys are on our side," Sirius interjected, irritation evident in his voice. Narcissa has more than made amends for what she was forced to do while her husband was alive. There's no reason Harry and Draco shouldn't be friends." Moody scowled, but before he could respond, Albus cleared his throat. "Harry's friendships aside," he interrupted, "you must not draw such attention to yourselves, and you must be careful what you say to—" "Everyone," Albus said, his gaze sweeping over the group with that condescending, disappointed grandfather expression that always made Remus bristle. "I understand that Harry is accustomed to seeking out information for himself, and it seems he has decided he no longer wants what I can offer him. But you must be cautious about what you say in his presence. We cannot be sure he can be trusted." "Oh, not this again," Sirius groaned. "Give it a rest, Albus. He doesn't have Voldemort in his head." "The nature of Harry's connection with Voldemort is strange, and involves mysterious magic, Sirius," Albus insisted. "With the recent changes in his behavior, we cannot dismiss the possibility entirely. Even if Harry himself is unaware of the influence, it could still be affecting him." "That poor boy," Molly said anxiously. "Ron and Hermione are so worried about him. He won't even talk to them anymore." Remus stifled a snort. "Worried? Sure. So worried that they were calling him a blood supremacist to anyone who would listen. But they wouldn't have shared that with Molly." It wasn't the first time this argument had surfaced in an Order meeting. As the same old points were rehashed for what felt like the dozenth time, Sirius grew increasingly furious in defense of his godson. Remus wondered how much longer the Order could hold together. He could see it in people's eyes, those who knew the truth about Dumbledore, those who stood by Harry. They all sat there, harbouring varying degrees of veiled rage as Albus, Moody and Molly insisted that Harry was under dark influences and needed to be handled with care. It would be so easy to just get up and leave. All of them could stand together, make a statement, and show Albus how many were no longer on his side. They could abandon the man and his sycophants to their slow-brewing disaster and turn away to do some real work. Already they were having meetings of their own, gathering at Seren or the members of the Order gathered at Grimmauld Place whenever they could, discussing their ongoing efforts to get at-risk individuals to safety. They remained unaware of those hiding at the Potter's home, Malfoy Manor, or the other properties they had started using across the country. They certainly didn't know about their contacts with Mrs. Zabini, Mr. and Mrs. Delacour, some of Charlie's friends in Romania, and a few of Victor Crumb's teammates in Bulgaria, all working to help smuggle people out of the country if staying became too dangerous. It was tempting to think they could accomplish so much more if they left the Order to crumble, but Remus knew they couldn't. They all understood the stakes. As long as Harry was publicly opposing Dumbledore, even if he hadn't yet begun to tarnish the man's reputation, they needed to remain on the headmaster's good side to stay informed, especially in case Albus's plans took a drastic turn. For now, Remus just wanted to keep Harry out of the spotlight, blissfully unaware, hardly different from previous years, except for Dumbledore's insistence that Harry was dangerous. But the moment that perception shifted, the moment Dumbledore decided Harry was too much of a risk, they needed to be prepared. Harry's life could depend on it. Meanwhile, Slughorn's Monday night supper was just as dreadfully boring as Harry had anticipated. This was a more formal sit-down event, and to his dismay, he found himself seated between Hermione Granger and Cormac McLaggen. Cormac, clearly upset about being denied a spot on the Quidditch team, showed no desire to engage with Harry. That left Harry stuck trying to ignore Hermione's attempts to befriend him. It was evident that someone had told her she needed to be nice to him again, which was a drastic shift from her previous behavior. How foolish did Dumbledore think Harry was? Annoyingly, with Hermione chattering away, Harry barely had a chance to converse with anyone else. Slughorn. Harry wasn't quite sure what he could say to the man. He had no idea how to extract any information, especially since he wasn't even certain what information he was seeking. If he outright asked Slughorn about Horcruxes, the man would go straight to Dumbledore, and Harry would be in serious trouble. As soon as Slughorn hinted at dismissing everyone for the night, Harry hurried out of the office. Hermione tried to follow him, but he quickly ducked into a side passage that conveniently opened up for him. One unexpected perk of holding the Hogwarts wards was the way the castle seemed willing to accommodate him whenever it could. Harry had been sneaking around using Salazar's passages since he'd discovered them, but it was nice to have other secret hideaways available too. The other heirs certainly appreciated it. Just the other day, Hannah had excitedly shared that she could squeeze an extra 20 minutes of studying in after lunch, thanks to the passages that allowed her to get from the Hufflepuff dorms to the upper levels of the school in no time. As he walked through the passage, Harry began to feel a gentle tugging in the corner of his mind, where the castle now occupied a space. It wasn't urgent. It didn't feel like a student was in trouble. More like the castle had something it wanted to show him. Well, Hogwarts hadn't led him astray yet. He followed the tug obediently, his eyebrows rising when he realized he was being led once again to the room of requirement. He was alone this time. The other heirs hadn't been summoned along with him. So, it wasn't a problem with the Wardstone. When Harry opened the door, his jaw dropped. He stood in awe, staring at a seemingly endless room filled with piles of assorted items. Books, clothes, furniture, and who knew what else. Prank items, strange potions, and sinister-looking weapons. Most of it seemed like junk, and a lot of it looked older than even Dumbledore. "The Room of Hidden Things," a voice whispered in his mind. Harry looked around the room and snorted. "Hogwarts lost and found, more like," he muttered. It was filled with everything the castle's occupants had ever forgotten or tried to hide from the teachers. Abandoned items, unused things, and probably some stolen goods too. All of it seemed to have found its way into this room. He peered closer at a stack of books and let out an impressed whistle. Many of the titles were familiar from the Seren library, rare and old books. When was the last time someone sorted this place out? He wondered aloud, sensing a vague, negative feeling emanating from the castle. It had been a long time then. Just another task to add to his list for after the war. But there had to be a reason he'd been brought here, beyond just being shown this treasure trove of odds and ends. He opened his mind to the castle, waiting for guidance. Slowly, Hogwarts began to nudge him down the aisles of forgotten junk, as if it had a clear destination in mind. When Harry turned a corner, he immediately sensed the problem. Thick, oily magic brushed against his own, a familiar darkness. Even without the matching darkness residing in his scar, he could tell exactly what it was. Another one? Here? He stepped closer to the bust of an ugly old man, where a tarnished silver tiara lay. It was leaking dark magic, Horcrux magic. Harry stared at it, wide-eyed. How long had this been hidden within the school? The Room of Hidden Things, indeed. Clearly, Tom Riddle had thought he was the only one to discover such a place, despite the evidence of countless students who had done the same over the years. He wondered how long the castle had been aware of this foul magic lurking within its walls, crying out for someone to take action, yet too weak to be heard. As he scanned the room, his eyes landed on a slightly moth-eaten silk scarf. Quickly, he wrapped the tiara in it, sending a mental thanks to Hogwarts for the tip-off. He hurried out of the room, focused on one destination. He paused only once, to check the person he was becoming. Harry was actually present when he decided to take a slight detour, not to Snape's quarters but to his personal lab just a few doors down. He knocked and stepped back to wait, unconcerned about not having his invisibility cloak. He hardly needed it these days. The castle would alert him if he needed to hide. Snape answered the door with a scowl, which deepened when he saw Harry. "Potter," he spat, narrowing his gaze as if sensing the dark magic Harry carried. "Get in here." He ushered Harry inside, warded the door and turned to him. "What's the matter?" Harry placed his wrapped bundle on the nearest workbench, carefully dislodging the scarf to reveal the tiara. "I found it just now, or rather, the castle showed it to me." He hadn't kept his new status as the true Lord Slytherin a secret from his family or from Draco. Snape was aware of Harry's new connection with Hogwarts magic. How many more of these damned things can there be? "This may well be the last," Snape murmured, scanning it with his wand. "Other than the snake, of course. But you remember what Bill said. Any more than 8 or 9 splits and the soul becomes too unstable to exist." Harry did a mental count. His scar, the locket, the diary, the cup, the ring, the snake, and now this. 7 Horcruxes, only 6 made intentionally. The number clicked in his mind, sending a trickle of cold down his spine. "I think there's one more." Snape raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that?" "Voldemort knows arithmancy, right? Think about the numbers of magical power. 3, 7, 9. He's definitely made more than 3, we know that. 9 would be too many. If he was going for 3 threes, the objects would probably come in 3s, but they don't. But 7. It's more powerful than the other 2, and it makes sense. 7 Horcruxes, 7 anchors to the mortal world, and if mine was, an accident makes it an extra, which gives him 8. The potions master's lips thinned in thought, his brow furrowed. "You're forgetting, of course, that there is another anchor, the original piece of his soul within him. 7 Horcruxes would make 8 pieces of soul in total, and 8 is a terrible number for such things. It's far more likely that he intended to create 6 Horcruxes, totaling 7 pieces of soul, and, as you say, the fragment within you was an unintended extra, shaken loose from his already fractured soul when the killing curse rebounded on him." He was right, of course. Voldemort might have lost his sanity in the process of splitting his soul, but if numbers were important to him, he wouldn't have upset that balance. And they likely were important to him. Someone as obsessed with magical strength would not ignore such a basic tenet of magical power, a fundamental law of existence. "So, you think this is the last one then, truly, other than the snake?" Harry bit his lip. "That's a big assumption to make about something so important." "Indeed," Snape agreed, "but it is not unreasonable, and we have precious few other ways of determining the number otherwise." Harry snorted to himself. "Yeah, can't exactly just stroll up and ask him." He glanced back at the tiara, shuddering at the magic seeping from it. "What's so special about this thing, anyway? Everything else has had meaning. Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's cup, a family ring, and his childhood diary. If I am not mistaken, this is the lost diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw." Snape's lips twisted into a sneer. "Another priceless artifact we will have to destroy to end the Dark Lord's reign." Harry frowned. He'd heard of Ravenclaw's diadem. He'd read about it somewhere, perhaps, or maybe he'd heard his Ravenclaw friends talk about it. "That's the one that's supposed to give you infinite knowledge if you wear it, right?" Harry nodded. Blimey, you'd think he might have bothered to put it on before he cursed it. Maybe he realized this whole thing was a bad idea. A reluctant twitch of amusement flickered across Snape's face. "Quite. Nevertheless, we must deal with the matter quickly." Snape straightened up, striding across his lab past the gently simmering potion. He waved his wand to reveal a hidden niche in one of his shelves. From that niche he pulled out a wooden box, and from the box came a crystal vial filled with vivid yellow liquid, basilisk venom. Snape's hands were perfectly steady as he brought the vial over. "Harry, get the crystal slab out, would you? It's beside the gold cauldron." Harry turned, peering at the rack of cauldrons until he spotted the shimmering piece of crystal tucked away between them. The slab was the size of a regular chopping board, and Harry knew it was the strongest, most magically resistant material available, perfect for working with volatile ingredients. He set the slab up on the worktop and carefully shifted the diadem atop it, making sure not to touch it with his bare skin. "Stand back," Snape warned. Harry didn't need telling twice. Wand raised in case the Horcrux tried to put up a fight, he took a large step backward, watching as Snape uncorked the vial and poured its contents over the diadem. Immediately, it began to hiss and bubble, and then scream. A black cloud of smoke seeped from the twisted metal, the same scream the diary had given, the same scream that had echoed from his scar and all the other Horcruxes as they died. Harry tried not to flinch, refusing to look away until the smoke had dissipated, even as the wards in his mind went haywire with such a strong concentration of danger. He hoped the other heirs wouldn't be alerted, hoped the castle recognized that he had this under control. Then there was silence, broken only by the slow hiss and sputter of the remnants. The silver and jewels melted away under the powerful basilisk venom, forming a repulsive puddle on the crystal slab. After a few moments, Snape flicked his wand, vanishing the mess with a swift motion. Both of them exchanged grim looks. "Well then," Harry murmured after a pause. "Just the Snape left, you think?" He desperately wanted to believe Snape's reasoning, to hold on to the hope that they were nearing the end. "We shall conduct whatever research we can to confirm," Snape replied, "but I truly believe so." The thought of being wrong was daunting, but if they were right, it would change everything. Chapter 90. All through Tuesday, Harry wished he could find a moment to tell Draco about the events of the previous evening. He trusted that Snape would get word back to the crowd at Seren, to Bill and his team investigating the matter. Draco was the only other person in the school who knew about Horcruxes, except for Salazar, of course. But the founder's portrait had already admitted he didn't know of a way to track existing Horcruxes, and he would likely agree with Snape's sensible logic regarding the 7 pieces of a soul. It all felt too easy, too neat, the way Harry had discovered all the Horcruxes, just as Dumbledore had found the one he would have struggled to hunt down. Perhaps it was a sign of Voldemort's arrogance to have such obvious hiding places for his precious treasures. He certainly hadn't shown good judgment in entrusting one to Lucius Malfoy for safekeeping. Could he really be so close to ending it all for good? Harry tried to push the thought from his mind, especially when Dumbledore was around. He couldn't risk the headmaster catching even the slightest fragment of a stray thought, especially not about that. Dumbledore was becoming less and less discreet about his growing dislike for Harry. It wasn't just Harry he had issues with either. Whether he believed Hermione's theory that Harry and the other Wizengamot heirs were plotting the next stages of pure-blood supremacy within the Ministry, or if he simply didn't like the idea that soon this group of teenagers would wield more political power than he could ever dream of, Dumbledore was starting to become terse with the other heirs. The tension had reached a point where even the other students began to notice. Of course, it was nothing drastic, Nothing that would lead people to think the esteemed Albus Dumbledore was bullying a bunch of schoolchildren. Still, he would stare at them during mealtimes, frowning. He would take points from them for ridiculous reasons and scold them without any real justification. The rumour mill was working overtime with each new incident, and Harry was more than happy to add fuel to that fire. "You should start spreading the word that he tried to give me a detention just to force me to spend time with him," Harry suggested to Parvati during their meeting that afternoon. The Gryffindor girl raised an eyebrow. "When did he do that?" "Oh, he didn't," Harry replied with a shrug, "but it sounds like something he would do, doesn't it?" Parvati giggled. Beside Harry, Draco rolled his eyes. "Add in too many false rumours and it'll backfire on you," he warned, but Harry wasn't bothered. The rest are all real. The current topic of gossip around the school was Dumbledore trying to corner Sully to ask about their parents, and constantly misgendering them in the process. It was a foolish move on Dumbledore's part. Those who knew the truth about the Fawleys' allegiances would realize Dumbledore was sticking his nose where it didn't belong and would clam up, while those who thought the Fawleys were still aligned with the light would think Dumbledore was getting too paranoid in his old age. Along with the rumours about Dumbledore's withered hand, there was a growing consensus that the headmaster was finally losing it. Harry couldn't be happier. "Have you thought up an excuse to get out of Slughorn's Christmas party yet?" Blaise asked, directing an amused look at Harry, who blinked in surprise. In the drama of the Horcrux, he had entirely forgotten Slughorn had announced plans for a Christmas party at dinner the night before. "Oh no, I'm going to have to go, aren't I?" Daphne cackled. "Don't look so smug, darling," Blaise warned. "I'm dragging you in with me. We're allowed to bring a guest to this one." "I hate you," the blonde Slytherin announced, but Blaise just winked. "Slughorn's letting us have a +1?" Harry asked, surprised. He must have zoned out during that part of the announcement. "Well, that might make it a little more bearable." He turned to Draco, grinned teasingly. "You want to finally see what all the fuss is about?" he joked. Then, with a thoughtful frown, he nodded. Harry choked in surprise. "All right then," Draco agreed, his eyes sparkling. "It can't be any worse than some of the parties my father used to throw." Blaise, Theo and Daphne all nodded in enthusiastic agreement, but Harry was too busy staring incredulously at his boyfriend. "You... really? You'd go with me?" Doubt flickered in his eyes. "Like, as a friend, or—" Draco's grey eyes softened. "I think we've both had enough of that ruse, don't you?" he mused wryly. "I'm ready if you are." Harry swallowed thickly. This felt like part of the much bigger conversation, a conversation they really shouldn't be having in front of their entire friend group. But at the same time it seemed so simple. Draco was right. They were both tired of pretending. Was Slughorn's Christmas party really the best place to go public, though? After a moment, Harry snorted. "I suppose people can't hate me much more than they already do." Those who thought he was going dark wouldn't care if Draco was his friend or his boyfriend. They'd see it as validation all the same. Plus, it would probably annoy Dumbledore, which was a good enough reason to do anything as far as Harry was concerned. "You're really sure you're ready for that?" he asked anxiously. Being Harry's boyfriend, his first ever confirmed romantic partner, would be a huge deal in the eyes of the public. Even though the prophet was filled with Death Eater propaganda these days, there would still likely be gossip in Witch Weekly once the news broke. "I'll have to face it sooner or later, won't I?" Draco replied easily. He seemed much calmer about this than Harry had expected. How long had he been thinking about this without Harry even knowing? Draco's hand covered Harry's on the tabletop, their fingers tangling together. "Think of it this way. We can go to the party, scandalize all of Slughorn's little worshippers, then head home for Yule and let the gossip hounds wear themselves out before we come back in January." Draco smirked. "And then we can shock them all over again by snogging in the library where anyone can see us." Harry laughed. "You're sure about this?" "Honestly, if you ask me one more time, I'll hex you," Draco replied, a hint of annoyance in his voice. "I've always known this day would come. Just let me gloat about snagging the hottest guy in school, all right?" Harry felt his cheeks flush, but he couldn't suppress his smile. He leaned in for a quick kiss. "You're on then," he said happily. Maybe having Draco at the party would make it halfway bearable. Suddenly a throat cleared pointedly, and Harry snapped his gaze away from Draco, realizing that their entire group was still there, and had been for the entire conversation. "Are you quite finished?" Susan asked, her eyebrows raised. "Because if you're going to start feeling each other up under the table again, you can leave." "We never—" "That wasn't—" Harry sputtered helplessly, earning laughter from several friends, the traitors. They hadn't been feeling each other up, they had just been sitting together. It wasn't his fault that Draco had decided to rest a hand on his thigh while they studied. "All of you are the worst friends," he declared, glaring at them. Neville snickered. "Too bad we're the only ones you've got," he replied, entirely unsympathetic. Harry scowled, but the frown didn't last long. Not when he looked back at Draco and thought about going to the party with him, properly together, being able to hold hands and kiss in public, finally free from holding himself back. For once he was actually looking forward to one of Slughorn's get-togethers. It was like a ball, but worse. As soon as the word spread that Slughorn was throwing a party, and that guests could bring a +1, Harry found himself fending off people all over the castle. The only silver lining was that this time it was mostly guys asking him out, though a few bold girls gave it a try as well. Some were familiar faces from the HA or other Gryffindors, while others were complete strangers. Each time Harry politely told them he already had a date. Unfortunately, since he and Draco wanted to keep their relationship under wraps until the party for a little peace, the entire school was buzzing with curiosity about who his mystery date could be. Until someone figured it out, Harry was considered fair game. His friends weren't much help either. They all knew the truth, but found the whole situation far too amusing. They had a habit of tossing out random names just for kicks. Harry wished he could simply tune it all out, but with Draco plotting the demise of every boy who even thought about asking him to the party, it was hard to avoid the topic, even when they were alone. Not that they had many chances to be alone lately. Between classes, Quidditch, the HA, and Harry's detentions with Snape, he and Draco had barely managed more than a quick encounter in an empty classroom over the past few weeks. Harry was very much looking forward to the holidays, but there were still almost 2 months to get through before that glorious freedom arrived. 2 long months of dealing with people asking him out or trying to pry the name of his mystery date from him. Why had Slughorn announced the party so early? Perhaps to ensure that Harry couldn't find a way to escape it. He had seemed positively delighted when Harry confirmed his attendance. At least the frenzy started to die down after the first couple of weeks. People began to realize that Harry wasn't just saying he had a date to let them down gently. Only the truly persistent kept trying. Meanwhile, the rumors about Dumbledore became even more captivating than Harry himself, especially after Dumbledore lost his temper in a rather spectacular fashion. Some 7th-year Slytherins were forcibly checked for dark marks, but classes continued as usual. Harry did his best to stay on top of everything happening around him. It was a relief to know that the Horcrux hunt was being put on the back burner. Bill and his Gringotts team had agreed with Snape's theory after spending time studying the results of the ritual Harry underwent. They were trying to estimate the power of the soul fragment in his scar, giving them an idea of how shattered Voldemort's soul truly was. 6 intentional Horcruxes and 1 accidental one seemed to be the sensible conclusion for everyone involved. Harry just hoped they weren't being overly optimistic. With the first Quidditch match of the season approaching, naturally against Slytherin because heaven forbid they have an easy start, Harry spent more time on the pitch with his team, determined to ensure they were as prepared as possible. With so many new members this year, he knew he wouldn't achieve the same level of cohesion he was used to with the Gryffindor team, but he was going to give it his all. He had missed Quidditch so much during Umbridge's ban last year, and he was determined to make up for everything he had lost. He was equally determined to win against his boyfriend, both of them eager for another locker-room tryst, no matter which team's showers they ended up in. "Did you hear the latest?" Ginny asked as she arrived for practice that evening, broom slung over her shoulder. Harry raised an intrigued eyebrow. Apparently Hermione asked Ron to Slughorn's party. Or, well, whether she actually asked is unclear. They might have just bickered their way into it, but I think they're going together. "Really?" Harry replied, mildly impressed. "Blimey, I didn't think they'd ever get their heads out of their asses." "Right?" Ginny agreed with a snort. "It's weird. They've been mad about each other for ages. Anyone can see it." "I don't know, but I can't really picture them dating. They just argue so much now that you're not around to mediate," Ginny said. Harry understood what she meant. It seemed like every third conversation between Hermione and Ron ended in some sort of argument. He wasn't one to judge bickering as a form of flirting, especially not while dating Draco, but still. "I guess we'll have to see how it goes," he replied. If it all went south, at least it would give everyone something else to talk about that didn't involve him. Relationship drama was pretty scarce these days, with half of their year either happily paired off or uninterested in settling down anytime soon. Just then, the rest of the team started to arrive, and Harry shifted his focus to more pressing matters. He could catch up on the Gryffindor gossip from Parvati and Lavender later. Finally, the moment had arrived. The Gryffindor versus Slytherin Quidditch match was upon them. For once, when Harry arrived at breakfast, the Gryffindor table was a vibrant block of red and gold, with Ginny and Neville at his sides. They cheered as he approached, and Katie shuffled over so they could sit with the rest of the team. "How are you feeling, Harry?" she asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "Brilliant. The weather looks perfect too," he replied with a grin. It wasn't too bright, not too windy, just crisp enough for excellent Quidditch conditions. "That's not the only good news. One of the Slytherin chasers, Vasey, the 4th year, got a concussion from a bludger to the head during practice yesterday, so Madame Pumphrey said he can't play. And Malfoy's out sick too, so they've got Harper as seeker." Katie paused, her eyes wide, as she suddenly realized that Harry might not see that as good news. "Malfoy's fine," she quickly added, "as far as I know. Just came down with a sudden flu or something." Harry bit his lip. Draco had seemed perfectly fine when they met up last night. He glanced over at the Slytherin table, where the team sat in their usual formation. The Gryffindor team was in their vibrant red and gold uniforms, ready for the match. Sure enough, Draco wasn't there, but 5th year Harper was suited up and looking a bit queasy himself. "I'm sure he's okay, Harry," Ginny said, nudging his shoulder playfully. "You can check on him after the match." Harry hummed in response, still feeling a knot of worry in his stomach. He must be feeling really lousy to miss the game, though. Playing against Gryffindor is the highlight of his year. Opportunities to fly as Seeker against Harry in a proper match were rare these days. "There's always next year," Katie shrugged. "I wouldn't have thought it would be that big a deal now that you two are friends and all." Heat rose in Harry's cheeks, and he tried to will it away. "I'd still rather fly against him than Harper," he replied evasively. "Some kind of challenge would be nice." "Oh, just shut up and let us take this easy win, Captain," Ginny teased. "Draco will get over it. You never know, he might appreciate the save to his pride. At least this way, when they lose to us, no one can say it's his fault." Despite his worry, Harry laughed. Just then, he noticed a familiar figure clad in green and silver heading his way. A few of the other Gryffindors booed and hissed, but it was all in good fun. Blaise was dating a Weasley, which made him practically one of them, even on Quidditch days. "He's doing fine, just sulking in the dorms," Blaise declared, leaning down to speak to Harry quietly. "But he says if you want to throw the match because of his illness, you're more than welcome to do so." Blaise sounded amused, and Harry's shoulders relaxed. If Draco was up for making jokes, he clearly wasn't too sick. "He wishes," Harry replied with a smile. "What's wrong with him?" Blaise frowned slightly, shaking his head just a fraction. Nothing Madame Pomfrey could pinpoint, but nothing she could declare foul play either. He just woke up with a fever. A headache. The potions hadn't worked, so Madame Pomfrey wouldn't clear him for the match. Heart aching in sympathy, Harry ran a hand through his hair. "That sucks." "Even magic can't cure everything," Neville remarked. "Some colds are just extra potion resistant." Harry hoped it was just that, and not something more serious. Either way, he didn't have time to dwell on it. He and the rest of the team needed to get to the changing rooms and prepare for the match. The Gryffindor table erupted in cheers as they left, several people wolf-whistling at the kiss Neville and Ginny shared before parting ways. The atmosphere was different from what Harry was used to before a match against Slytherin. There was hardly any of the animosity he had experienced when he first started at Hogwarts, though enough genuine Death Eater supporters remained on the Slytherin team to make the match dangerous. Harry gave his best attempt at a speech worthy of Oliver Wood, and Katie gave him a discreet thumbs up at the end. Then they headed out for their first game of the season. It felt strange stepping up to shake hands with Urquhart, not seeing Draco's grey eyes narrowed in challenge among the opposing team. Harper was taller and broader than Harry, and Harry silently thought that catching the snitch would be no trouble at all. As the match began, Harry's firebolt responded quickly beneath him as he soared into the air, circling the pitch and watching his team spring into action. Despite his worries about Draco, he felt confident. They had a fantastic team, certainly better than Slytherin, who were down two of their main players. He could have done without Zacharias Smith on commentary, but it was easy enough to tune the Hufflepuff boy out. His chest swelled with pride as his team performed exceptionally well. The Chasers scored 3 early goals with ease. The new beaters managed the bludgers competently, and Vicky. There was honestly very little for Harry to do because of it. Harper's strategy seemed to be to follow Harry around and harass him as much as possible. However, he wasn't nearly as annoying as Draco had been in their youth, and with his superior broom, Harry was able to shake him off easily. Slytherin tried their best, but it simply wasn't good enough. When Gryffindor was already ahead 80-20, Harry caught a flash of gold out of the corner of his eye and immediately spun around to chase after it. Harper tried to follow, but it was no use. By the time he was on Harry's tail, Harry was already halfway to the snitch. His hand closed around the fluttering gold ball, and the stadium erupted into cheers. As Harry steadied his broom and raised the snitch in triumph, he noticed Harper scowling at him, glaring hard. Harry just grinned even wider, and then lost sight of the Slytherin player as he was enveloped in a hug from half a dozen players clad in red and gold. "You all did brilliantly," Harry exclaimed, clapping the shoulder of anyone he could reach. "You too, Captain," Vicky replied, beaming at him. They all lowered themselves to the ground, and as Harry made his way to the changing rooms, he ruffled Ginny's hair. "Your brothers will be so proud of you," he told her, and she beamed back at him. It was a shame, really. Due to the political climate outside the castle, Dumbledore wasn't allowing any spectators at the student Quidditch matches this year. Harry was sure all the Weasley boys would have come if they could. Next year. He shot a somewhat wistful look at the showers as he stripped off his Quidditch robe. There would be no post-match romp with Draco, unfortunately. That was another thing that would have to wait a year. As with any Gryffindor win, a party in the common room would follow. Harry had already put Dobby on snack duty, and it took only a few moments to sneak out to Hogsmeade for more treats. It was the usual delivery from the 3 broomsticks. Harry had promised the twins he'd uphold the tradition, after all. Rosemerta shot him a scolding look as she brought out the crate of butter beer. "You shouldn't be sneaking around, Potter. Not with things the way they are. The target on your back is big enough," she warned. "They won't get me in the village," he replied confidently. Rosemerta didn't seem convinced and chided him to hurry back to school. "Next time, just send a bloody owl order in advance," she said, rolling her eyes. "It's not like your team ever loses, is it?" Harry laughed, waved goodbye, and ducked out of the pub with the butterbeer safely tucked in his pocket. When he arrived at the common room, the party was already in full swing, cheers erupting from the packed space. He set up the butterbeer and grabbed an armful of bottles, then turned to find his teammates. In his search, he was briefly waylaid by the enthusiastic Creevy brothers, eager to show him the pictures they'd taken during the match. There were some fantastic shots, and Harry made them promise to get copies for him, especially the one of Ginny scoring an incredible goal that he knew Charlie would love. Eventually, he made his way over to the team gathered by the window. He handed out the butterbeers he'd brought, making sure to give an extra to Neville, who had Ginny happily perched in his lap. Katie shuffled over to make room for Harry, between her and Vicky on the sofa, while Jimmy and Richie sat on the arms of the armchair Demelza had claimed. "Not a bad start to the season, then," Katie declared, clinking the neck of her bottle against Harry's. "Even if Slytherin wasn't playing their best team, they still gave us a run for our money. We play like that against Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, and the cup is in the bag," Harry assured, beaming at his team. "You were all fantastic." Honestly, Harry thought to himself, there would be time for critiques and improvements at the next practice. For now, he wanted everyone to revel in a match well played, especially the new members who had shown remarkable progress since the beginning of the year. He lingered for a while, chatting as he sipped his butterbeer, and accepting congratulations from fellow Gryffindors who came by to pat him on the back and engage with the rest of the team. At one point, he caught sight of Ron and Hermione sharing a kiss in a corner, and he couldn't help but stare, wide-eyed with fascination. "Looks like he's eating her face, doesn't it?" Ginny remarked, her tone teasing. "But I guess everyone has to start somewhere." "Hasn't he spent most of the last year and a half giving you a hard time for kissing in public?" Vicky asked, raising her brows. Ginny nodded in agreement. "Yup," she replied, popping the pea. "Maybe this is him trying to get back at me for it. Or he's just a big hypocrite, trying to brag about finally getting someone to kiss him." She continued to watch the couple, her expression growing increasingly disturbed. Really, though, there's no way watching me snog Neville is more gross than that. Harry, who wasn't particularly inclined to enjoy either snogging session, couldn't help but agree. "Well, on that note," he declared, patting his thigh as he got to his feet, "I'm out. I'll catch you all later." Disappointed groans filled the air. "Oh, come on, Harry. Don't let them put you off your party," Demelza insisted. "Oh, he's not," Ginny interjected smugly. "He's just heading off for a private party of his own. Aren't you?" Her brown eyes met his challengingly, and he raised his hands in a playful "you got me" gesture. "Maybe I am, maybe I'm not," he drawled, winking at her. "Don't keep him up too late," Neville called out. "Both of you need your rest. You have classes in the morning." Harry barked out a laugh, merely waving goodbye as he squeezed through the crowd. Harry made his way through the crowd, but first he needed to grab his invisibility cloak from his dorm. "Hi, Harry." He resisted the urge to groan as Romilda Vane stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Hi, Romilda. Excuse me, sorry. I need to go upstairs." "Want some company?" she asked, giggling flirtatiously. Harry gave her a flat look. "I'm going to take a piss, so no," he replied evenly, feeling a small spark of satisfaction when she blushed. "Oh, I got these for you." She held out a thin rectangular package. "As a congratulations for winning the match. You're a really great captain, Harry." She giggled again. Harry glanced down at the box of chocolate cauldrons she'd forced into his hands. Thanks. Bye then." Ignoring her stuttering, he neatly sidestepped her and continued towards the dorm. Slughorn's party couldn't come soon enough. Maybe then people would finally leave him alone. Tossing the chocolate cauldrons aside, indifferent to where they landed, he certainly had no intention of eating them, he dug through his satchel for his invisibility cloak and the map. He paused for a moment, contemplating. What else could he bring Draco? What do you give someone when they're unwell? He had vague memories of Aunt Petunia feeding a sick Dudley endless soup and ice cream. But Draco wasn't a big fan of ice cream, and he'd probably already eaten. Besides, bringing food wasn't that impressive when Draco had full access to the same house elves Harry did. What else could he bring? He stared at his trunk as if it might hold all the answers. There was no point in bringing potions, not when he'd likely already taken all he could from Pomfrey and Snape. A book, maybe? Then his gaze landed on the blanket balled up at the bottom of his bed. It was a new edition. Andromeda had quilted it for his birthday, a patchwork of monochrome fabrics featuring the black family crest. The family crest sat prominently in the center. Perfect. It wouldn't even seem out of place if Crabbe or Goyle saw it. They would just assume it was a gift from his mother. Harry folded the blanket, shrinking it down to fit in his pocket, and hurried out of the dormitory. Getting through the common room was a bit of a challenge. It was far too crowded to sneak out under the cloak, but being visible meant people were eager to talk to him. With a few brusque remarks, he managed to make his way through, and once he was in the corridor outside, he headed toward the nearest Parseltongue passage. Sneaking into the Slytherin common room was easy, thanks to the castle wards that eliminated the need for a password. The snake pit was a much more sombre sight. They had nothing to celebrate, after all. But nobody noticed the door open as if by magic, and Harry moved silently toward the boys' dorms. He had the Marauder's map open in one hand beneath the cloak, inching toward the room that held just one single dot. He was right to assume Draco's dorm mates would seek refuge elsewhere, just in case he was contagious. He crept through the door, shutting it firmly behind him, and murmured a privacy ward under his breath. He heard a quiet, muffled call. "Blaise, is that you?" "Not Blaise," Harry replied softly, shrugging off the cloak. The lights were dim, but he could see Draco lying in bed, the drapes only half closed. He was propped up on some pillows, his face paler than usual, with his hair ruffled and unkempt. Draco's eyes widened at the sight of his unexpected visitor. "Harry, how'd you get in here?" "Slytherin's heir, remember?" Harry teased, striding over. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to stroke Draco's cheek gently. His skin felt a bit warm. "How are you feeling, love?" Draco groaned quietly. "Like I've been hit with about 8 bludgers," he admitted. "Honestly, how was the match? I heard you won." Draco's glare was about as fierce as a kitten's, and Harry couldn't help but feel his heart melt. "We did. Sorry," he replied, kicking off his shoes and leaning in to kiss Draco's forehead. "I brought you a present, though." He pulled the shrunken blanket from his pocket and returned it to its usual size, shaking it out before draping it over Draco's bed. "Thought you could borrow it until you feel better." Draco's breath hitched as he looked down at the blanket. Harry had no doubt that by Christmas Draco would have one of his own, but it was the thought that counted. "Oh," Draco murmured, Thank you. You didn't have to." He frowned slightly. "Shouldn't you be up in your tower partying right now? How late is it?" Harry chuckled, running a fond hand through his boyfriend's tousled hair. "I partied for a little while, but I was worried about you. I know Blaise said you were fine, but it's not like you to miss Quidditch." "It's not like me to get sick either," Draco groused. "Pomfrey says it's just a virus and it should work its way through my system in a day or so. I just wish taking potions would help." "It's no fun being sick," Harry sympathized, and Draco shot him a kitten-like glare again. "You wouldn't know. You've never been sick a day in your life." That was true. Even at the Dursleys, Harry had never fallen ill, even when everyone else in the house had come down with something. He'd dealt with infections from injuries and the usual side effects of starvation and dehydration, but colds, viruses, and stomach bugs had always passed him by. "Still," Harry said, frowning slightly, "hey, budge over." It took a bit of nudging to get Draco to shift over enough for Harry to burrow under the blankets beside him, gently pulling the blonde's head down to his chest. Draco gave a weak smile, grateful for the comfort. "Don't want to give you my germs," Draco protested. But Harry simply kissed the top of his head and held him closer. "We just established that I don't get sick," Harry pointed out. "And if I do, I'll deal with it." Missing a day or two of classes wouldn't be the end of the world. Draco sighed, seemingly conceding the argument, and curled into Harry's side. He was warm, too warm, really, but Harry could still feel the faint shivers running through him. He gently stroked Draco's hair, wishing he could do more to help. "I'm sorry you missed the match today," he said quietly. Draco hummed in response. "I'm more sorry I missed our plans for after the match," he retorted, causing Harry to grin despite himself. "Those plans will keep," Harry assured him, cuddling Draco closer. "But if Harper's going to be your replacement when you graduate, he'll need a fair bit of work." "Harper's an idiot," Draco groaned, his fingers curling in the hem of Harry's t-shirt. "It was a last-minute thing. I've always wondered why we don't have reserve teams, you know, backup players who train with the main team." It seemed unfair to Harry that only the players on the main house teams got to participate in Quidditch. What about those who weren't very skilled but loved the game? Or the kids who had never played before and didn't know if they had any talent or passion for it? At Muggle schools, Everyone played sports, regardless of whether they were on the teams. "It is a bit stupid," Draco agreed. "Maybe we can propose reserve teams next year. McGonagall won't mind, she likes Quidditch." Harry hummed thoughtfully. It was certainly an interesting idea. Though after how the tryouts had gone this year, he dreaded the thought of finding an entire reserve team. "Something to think about," he said. He shuffled further back against the pillows, adjusting his hold on Draco in the narrow bed, until the blonde was sprawled almost entirely on his chest, allowing Harry to run his fingers through Draco's hair. Harry gently ran his hand up and down Draco's back, knowing that this simple gesture could turn him into a puddle of goo. "I've missed this, you know." They had taken for granted over the summer how easy it was to simply lie in bed and cuddle. Sure, they had the conjured sofa in the chamber, and sometimes the room of requirement, but they rarely had the time to lie down together like this, without giving in to the urge to tear each other's clothes off. It was a shame that Draco's illness was the reason for this moment. "Me too." Harry could hear the drowsiness in Draco's voice, so he kept stroking his back until he felt the blonde go completely limp, his breathing only slightly laboured. He knew he couldn't stay the whole night in the Slytherin dorm. Eventually the other boys would want to return to their room, and there would be hell to pay if Crabbe or Goyle found him there. But he stayed as long as he could, and when it got late, he reluctantly wriggled his way out of Draco's grasp, trying not to wake him. It didn't work. Draco's grey eyes blinked groggily up at him, a cute frown tugging at his lips. Harry leaned down and kissed him softly. "I have to go to bed," he whispered. "Go back to sleep." Draco sighed and settled back down, and Harry tucked the blankets around him more snugly. He noticed how Draco's hand fisted in the patchwork quilt, pulling it up to his face and inhaling Harry's lingering scent from the fabric. Harry's heart stuttered, and a smile tugged at his lips. He couldn't resist leaning in for one more kiss before he left. "Feel better soon. I love you." Love you," Draco replied drowsily, already halfway back to sleep. Reluctantly, Harry pulled himself away from the blonde's bedside, covering himself with the invisibility cloak and reactivating the map. With one last look at Draco, he prepared to slip away into the night. Harry watched his beloved Draco, still drowsy, as he dismantled the wards on the door. The journey back to Gryffindor Tower felt heavy, leading him to his cold, empty bed. Thankfully, Draco's illness seemed to pass quickly. The next morning he was at breakfast, still a bit pale, but insisting he was ready for classes. Harry caught his eye from the Gryffindor table and winked, earning an eye roll in return. "What did you do? Snog him back to full health?" Ginny teased under her breath, shooting Harry a knowing look. He shot her a glare, grateful for the distraction, when a commotion erupted at the far end of the table. They turned to see Ron standing in front of Romilda Vane, his eyes filled with awe. Harry couldn't hear what Ron was saying, but judging by the incredulous expressions around them, it had to be something good. "But Romilda," Ron continued, his voice growing louder as the entire hall began to hush and focus on him. "We're meant to be together, can't you see? You're the most beautiful girl in the whole school." Harry sucked in a sharp breath as Hermione walked through the door just then. She froze, her hand flying to her mouth, clearly stunned, while Ron continued his impassioned speech. "Why are you acting like this?" Romilda asked, utterly bewildered. Ron reached for her hand, clasping it firmly. "Because I love you, and I know you love me too." "You've never even spoken to me before," Romilda protested, her eyes wide. "What the hell is going on here?" Hermione screeched, marching up to Ron and grabbing him by the shoulder. Ron shrugged her off with a glare. "Leave me alone, Hermione," he snapped, turning back to Romilda, unfazed. "Look, just give me a chance, and I know we could be happy together. You're the love of my life, Romilda Vane." Suddenly Romilda went pale, letting out a horrified squeak. She stood up and, to Harry's utter bewilderment, hurried towards the exit. Romilda pointed an accusing finger at Harry. "You gave him the chocolates I gave you." Harry blinked in confusion. "You what?" "The chocolate cauldrons," she repeated. "They were specifically for you. You let him have them, didn't you?" She gestured toward Ron, who was rushing over, looking furious. "Of course, you're after Harry." "It's always Harry bloody Potter," Ron grumbled, glaring at her. "You know he's not even into girls, right? He can't love you the way I do, Romilda." Just then Hermione caught up with Ron and slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing through the hall. "How dare you!" she hissed, spinning around and storming out, her shoulders shaking with sobs. "What is the meaning of all this?" Professor McGonagall thundered, striding over with Dumbledore close behind. "Mr. Weasley, Miss Vane, what in Merlin's name is going on here?" "It's all Harry's fault," Romilda accused. "If he'd just eaten the chocolates I gave him, instead of letting Ron find them—" She glared at Ron, who looked like he might cry. But Romilda," Ron stammered. "And what exactly was in these chocolates, Miss Vane?" McGonagall asked coldly. Romilda froze, suddenly aware of how much trouble she was in. Nothing?" "Indeed. So if I were to ask Madame Pomfrey to test Mr. Weasley for the presence of love potions, it would come back negative, wouldn't it?" The Gryffindor housemistress's stare had broken stronger people than Romilda Vane. The fourth-year girl crumbled under that piercing gaze within seconds. "All right. I stole Amortentia from Slughorn's classroom," she blurted, tears welling in her eyes. If Harry would just give me a chance." She turned to him plaintively, but he recoiled in horror. "I'm gay, Romilda," he reminded her, backing away. "And even if I weren't, don't you dare drug people into loving you. That's basically rape." This wasn't just any love potion. It was Amortentia, the most powerful love potion in the world. It could turn someone into a mindless slave if dosed repeatedly. "I think we all need to calm down for a moment," Dumbledore interjected, but McGonagall dismissed him. "Amortentia is illegal, Miss Vane. If you were of age, you'd be facing time in Azkaban for such a crime." She glared at Romilda, who gasped and continued to cry. I didn't mean to," Romilda wailed. "I just wanted him to like me." "Now, Minerva," Dumbledore said gently, "I'm sure Miss Vane is very sorry for what she's done. And really, if Mr. Potter hadn't been so careless in leaving those chocolates lying around his dormitory, poor Mr. Weasley wouldn't be in this predicament." "You're trying to blame this on me," Harry shouted, furious. "She's the one who drugged the chocolates in the first place." "Feelings can make people do silly things, especially young ladies like Miss Vane," Dumbledore replied, shaking his head. "Albus, you cannot be serious," McGonagall argued. "Potter had nothing to do with this. He was unaware there was anything wrong with the chocolates. And I certainly expect young ladies of Miss Vane's age to have better sense than to use illegal love potions right under my nose, not to mention stealing from a professor. You'll be lucky not to be expelled for this. You'll be lucky if no one presses charges." Romilda burst into louder tears. Now, that's a bit drastic," Dumbledore said, his composure faltering as he realized the entire hall was staring at him in disgust. He understood, perhaps for the first time, how serious this situation was. essentially an attempted violation. "Why don't we all take this up to my office to get everything straightened out?" "I'm not going anywhere with you or her," Harry declared, glaring at Romilda. "And I really think someone should take Ron to the hospital wing." "Right you are, Potter. Miss Weasley, take your brother up to Madame Pumphrey, will you?" McGonagall instructed. Ginny nodded, her pale face showing through her freckles as she grabbed Ron by the arm. He was reluctant to leave, calling out Romilda's name. Eventually, Ginny had to resort to stunning him, levitating him from the hall. "Mr. Potter, will you be pressing charges?" McGonagall asked plainly. Harry gritted his teeth. "Not this time, but I will if she tries anything again." He decided to give her the benefit of the doubt, assuming she didn't truly understand what amortentia was like and how helpless it would have left him. McGonagall gave a curt nod and gripped Romilda tightly by the shoulder, frog-marching her out of the hall. No one else moved. "The rest of you, off to class," the Scottish woman barked from the doorway. "My 7th-year class take a free period. Go, you're all running late." As soon as she disappeared, a scramble of activity erupted, everyone hurrying to finish whatever breakfast they had abandoned. Harry didn't realize he was shaking until Neville eased him down onto a bench. Parvati and Lavender quickly appeared at his side. "Are you all right, Harry?" Lavender asked, her voice trembling. He nodded jerkily. "Potter?" He looked up to see Professor Babbling frowning down at him with concern. "Don't worry about making it to class. Missing one period won't kill you, and I dare say your mind would be elsewhere regardless." Her frown deepened as she patted him on the shoulder. "I'll give your homework back to Mr. Malfoy to pass on to you." "Thanks, Professor," Harry croaked as she walked away. Across the room. In the hall, Harry noticed Draco staring at him with pained eyes, clearly torn between coming over to check on him and the risk of being late to class. Harry pointedly flicked his gaze towards the door. He could talk to Draco later. If the blonde approached him now, Harry was afraid he might lose his temper. He couldn't help but wonder, if Draco had eaten even one of those chocolate cauldrons, how many had Ron consumed to become so infatuated so quickly? Harry didn't particularly like Ron's actions, but he still felt sympathy for him. No one deserved to be caught in a love potion's grip. Hopefully, Hermione would understand once she heard what really happened. But then he thought, what if it had been him? If he had been dosed and approached Romilda in a more private setting than the Great Hall, how far would she have let it go? How did Slughorn not notice some was missing from the cauldron? Parvati remarked quietly. Harry grimaced. The potions professor hadn't been in the hall during the chaos, but Harry was certain McGonagall would give him a stern lecture for leaving amortentia unsupervised in a school full of students. How many others could have snuck some out? "You know, I think Romilda got lucky there," Neville said, surprising Harry. "Her? I was the lucky one," Harry exclaimed. He had been too preoccupied with worrying about Draco to even remember the chocolates. Neville's hazel eyes were serious as they met his. "Yeah, but imagine what your boyfriend would have done to her if she'd succeeded," he pointed out. "Way worse than anything Hermione could come up with." Harry sucked in a sharp breath. Neville was right. There was nothing stopping Draco from destroying her just for trying, and Harry was half tempted to let him. Even Lavender, who didn't know who Harry was dating, though he wouldn't put it past her to have figured it out by now, perceptive as she was, looked nauseous at the thought. "Next HA meeting," Harry murmured softly. "We're learning detection spells, all right?" Harry said, knowing a few thanks to Snape and Sirius. He had never expected to use them regularly at school, especially not after Romilda's little stunt. "Sounds good, Harry," Lavender agreed, gently squeezing his shoulder. "Why don't we head up to the common room for a bit? We've got Snape second period. I don't think he'll go easy on you after this." Harry grimaced. He wasn't sure he had the energy to pretend to hate Snape, not now, but he knew he had to find it somewhere. "I don't know why I'm so shaken by this," he muttered, scowling as he stood up. "I didn't even take the potion." "But you might have," Parvati said, her voice filled with sympathy. "It's scary. I can't believe Romilda would do that. I can't believe anyone would do that." She shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. "I hope she gets suspended," Neville muttered darkly. "Doubt it," Harry replied. "You saw Dumbledore. He was all ready to sweep it under the rug. He thought it was my fault for letting Ron eat the chocolates." All four of them scowled at that. "Dumbledore's losing his mind," Lavender declared. "I never thought I'd say this, but he really needs to retire." Harry glanced up and met Neville's gaze. It wasn't the ideal situation to start shattering people's trust in Dumbledore, but he would take it. It was decided that the current political climate made it too dangerous to suspend Romilda. Instead, she was given a month's worth of detentions with McGonagall and banned from Hogsmeade for the rest of the year. He also heard she was strongly discouraged from trying to speak to Harry ever again. Even if McGonagall hadn't ordered it, Harry felt sure she wouldn't have approached him anyway. When she saw him in the common room, after lunch, Romilda turned bright red and hurried to her dormitory. Meanwhile, Harry spent most of the evening angrily dueling Snape in the chamber, having earned a detention of his own during class. His friends were ready to riot, but Harry secretly appreciated the chance to blow off some steam. "Do I need to go over your detection spells?" the potions master asked when they paused from dueling. Harry shook his head. "I know them, and I would have used them if I had planned to eat the chocolates at all." He wasn't foolish enough to blindly consume a gift from a girl he barely knew. "I want you using them at every meal, and on anything else you might consume, unless it has come from Kerry or Dobby." "Yes, Severus." That was a rule Harry was more than happy to follow. He straightened up, intending to ask for another duel, when he suddenly sensed something from the castle. A mental image of Draco pacing outside the room of requirement flashed in his mind. Blinking away the image, he grimaced at Snape. Draco's in the room. I think he wants to see me. Can I?" Snape's scowl softened, at least as much as it could for anyone who wasn't Remus. "We're done here," he confirmed. "Be careful when you return to your dorm. Weasley has been released from the hospital wing, and he may blame you for his predicament." Harry grimaced. He hadn't even thought about that. "I'll be on my guard," he promised, heading over to the passage that would let the professor back into his office. He walked Snape back up to the school, opened the passage at the other end for him, bid him good night, and then hurried to take a passage up to the room. As the castle had promised, Draco was waiting for him, and the blonde slumped in relief when Harry entered. "I wasn't sure you'd know I was here." "Hogwarts told me," Harry assured him, smiling. As Harry sank into Draco's arms, a sofa materialized beside them, and the two settled in comfortably. Harry buried his face in Draco's neck, feeling the warmth and safety there. "I want to kill her," Draco muttered, his fingers tangling in Harry's hair. "Not this time," Harry chided gently. "If she tries again, she's all yours." Draco snorted, and Harry felt his lips press against the crown of his head. For the first time that day, Harry truly relaxed, allowing himself to stop pretending he was unaffected by what had almost happened. He let out a shuddering breath and cried in Draco's embrace. When the tears finally subsided, He would kiss his boyfriend passionately, tugging impatiently at his shirt, begging for reassurance that Romilda hadn't succeeded, that his body was his own, his love belonged to Draco, and nothing in the world could change that. Draco would give him that reassurance, whispering words of love, his hands on Harry's skin, a testament that nothing could tear them apart. Yet even after that, sleep would still elude him. Chapter 91. Life went on. Much faster than Harry had anticipated, the students of Hogwarts moved on from the drama surrounding the Amortentia incident. Once Ron was out of the hospital wing and he and Hermione had reconciled, there wasn't much left to gossip about. Romilda barely showed her face outside of mealtimes, and Harry ignored anyone who tried to pry into the situation. Since nothing truly terrible had happened, aside from Ron making a fool of himself in front of the entire school, everyone seemed perfectly content to brush it off as a prank gone wrong. They quickly shifted their attention to the next juicy topic: who Harry was taking to Slughorn's party. Part of Harry understood why they didn't want to linger on the incident, but another part of him, the part that still carefully examined every meal and every drink, refusing anything handed to him by someone he didn't trust, couldn't believe how little they recognized the potential disaster it could have been. Then again, with Dumbledore as their example, how could he expect anything different? As the Christmas holidays and Slughorn's party approached, the students began to grow restless. Harry had no doubt that many of them would be staying at the castle over the break, their homes too dangerous to return to. With the flu network now under surveillance, Professor Fitwick had offered to create port keys for anyone wishing to go home, which was technically illegal. But then again, so were half a dozen other things the staff was doing, including harbouring Harry Potter. Harry had already been assured that Snape would take him and Draco home with a portkey of their own, and that had been cleared through McGonagall. This also meant that McGonagall would assume Harry was spending Christmas at Malfoy Manor. However, considering how tightly locked down the Manor's wards were, Harry didn't see that as a problem. Ordinarily, Hogwarts would have been buzzing with excitement as students eagerly anticipated going home for Christmas, looking forward to a break from classes and homework. They still felt that excitement, but it was laced with an undercurrent of anxiety. The atmosphere was more cautious, fragile, like wounded animals waiting for a chance to retreat and heal in private. Everyone was aware of the dangers lurking beyond the castle walls, but not everyone felt confident in their safety if they dared to step outside. Still, they were all trying their best to embrace the holiday spirit, especially the younger students. They understood enough to be scared, but lacked the understanding of why. The castle was adorned with cheerful decorations, and Slughorn was eager to assure everyone that his party would provide the festive cheer they all needed. "It'll be a bit quieter than I had hoped, of course," he said apologetically during one potions class. "I originally wanted to invite some friends from outside the castle, ex-students, you know, who have an interest in helping the next generation find their feet. But with safety concerns being what they are, that hasn't been possible. But not to worry, I'm sure we'll still have a smashing time." Harry wasn't so sure about that, but he had committed to attending the event. At least he was dragging Draco along with him. He wouldn't have to suffer alone. It was quite impressive how many people were interested in who Harry was taking to the party, despite the fact that so few would actually be attending. He understood why. He had made it clear that his date was a boyfriend, not just a friend like Susan at the Yule ball. But it still baffled him how many were invested in his love life. Just a few months ago, many of these same people had been hurling insults at him in the corridors, accusing him of going dark. Dozens of eyes were on him at dinner, as if he were about to reveal his secret an hour before the party, in front of the entire school. Harry kept his head down, focusing on his meal and ignoring Ginny's quiet laughter beside him. "I can't wait to see everyone's faces," she whispered, prompting him to glare at her. "Surely it won't be that much of a shocker," he replied. Across the table, Lavender giggled. "Sorry, Harry, but if it's who I think it is, it definitely will be," she said with a teasing smile. He sighed. "It's probably exactly who you think it is," he replied mournfully, his gaze following hers as she glanced over to the Slytherin table. The brunette let out a quiet squeal of delight. "God, that's hot," she exclaimed, blushing afterward. Far from being offended, Harry chuckled. "He is," he agreed, fully aware of how ridiculously attractive his boyfriend was. "She meant both of you," Ginny chimed in, giving him an elbow in the side. "And she's right." When Harry raised an eyebrow, she simply winked back at him. Lavender giggled again, and they all headed up to Gryffindor Tower to prepare for the party. In the common room, Harry declared loudly that he was meeting his date at the party, signalling everyone to move along. Neville, who was Ginny's date, joined Harry as they put on their dress robes, both ignoring Ron's scowl as he did the same. Neville wore a chocolate-brown set that made his eyes pop, while Harry donned deep purple robes, a gift from Narcissa, which he assumed were quite fashionable. He spent a bit of extra time trying to tame his hair. "You're putting in an awful lot of effort for a bloke who's seen you at your worst, you know," Neville remarked, amusement dancing in his eyes. Harry shrugged. "We don't get dressed up very often, and it might just be Slughorn's party, but this is a big deal for us." It was their first time in public as a couple, and he didn't want Draco to have a single ounce of regret about standing by his side. "Well, I think that's about as good as it'll get, mate," Neville said bluntly. Harry glanced in the mirror, tilting his head to check his hair from different angles before letting out a sigh. "I suppose." He tucked away his hair potion and washed his hands with a quick spell. "Let's go," he said, ready to face the evening ahead. "Let's not keep Ginny waiting," Harry said, glancing ahead. The red-headed witch was indeed waiting for them, her face lighting up at the sight of Neville. She wore beautiful gold dress robes that Harry hadn't seen before, and they complemented Neville's robes so well that he wondered if it had been a deliberate choice. Maybe Neville's gran had helped with the outfits. "Well, you two clean up nicely," she said approvingly. "Shall we go find you a man, Harrykins?" For a moment she sounded so much like George that Harry did a double take. Then he chuckled. "Good thing I know exactly where to find one," he joked. "Oh, I wish I was going tonight," Parvati moaned enviously, sprawled on the sofa in front of the fire with Lavender. "You all look so good. There are never any excuses to dress up around here." "We need another Yule ball," Lavender agreed with a wistful sigh. "You three have fun." Just as she said that, Hermione started to descend the staircase from the dorms. The trio exchanged a glance and hurried out of the portrait hole. The last thing they wanted was to be stuck walking to the party alongside Ron and Hermione. "I wonder who McLagan's taken," Harry mused, thinking of the only other Gryffindor in the Slug Club. "One of the Hufflepuff girls in my year, but I can't remember which," Ginny replied. "Pretty sure all the girls in 6th and 7th know better than to agree to anything with him." That didn't surprise Harry one bit. "You ready for this, then?" Ginny asked, her excitement palpable. "Your official coming out. Well, you know, your other coming out." Harry snorted. "Yeah, I'm ready." He'd been ready for ages, to be honest. But this felt like the right time. A big event where it would be extremely impolite for people to ask questions, and he could leave for 2 weeks almost immediately after. He wanted everyone to know Draco was his. Still, his stomach fluttered anxiously as they grew closer to Slughorn's office. Then he saw him. Draco was waiting in an alcove, slightly shielded from view, his hands clasped in front of him. He looked up at the sound of footsteps, and his lips curled into the widest smile he dared show in public. He stepped out of the alcove, revealing perfectly tailored slate-grey dress robes, the tie knotted at his throat the exact same colour as Harry's own robes. Definitely Narcissa's doing. "I can hear the hearts of half the students at Hogwarts breaking already," Ginny remarked teasingly. "Godric, you look smitten. Go on, if you must." Harry snickered, but happily crossed the distance to Draco, offering his date a smooth bow. "May I?" he asked, extending his arm. Draco raised an eyebrow, then snorted, stepping closer and resting his hands on Harry's shoulders before kissing him firmly. "I really need to find more excuses to get you in formal wear," he drawled, smoothing his hands over the front of Harry's robes. They were high-collared, without the need for a tie or anything, yet surprisingly comfortable. "Only if you're there with me," Harry replied without missing a beat. "I should have nicked Colin's camera on the way out," Ginny sighed, approaching with Neville's hand in hers. "One picture of the two of you looking like this sent to Witch Weekly, and I'd never have to work a day in my life." Draco laughed, neatly tucking his arm into Harry's. "Please, that rag doesn't pay nearly as well as it should." He stepped back, gesturing for the other pair to go ahead. "Ladies first. Only if you give us a minute to get in there before you make your big entrance," Ginny replied, patting Harry on the cheek before letting Neville escort her into Slughorn's office, where music and quiet conversation were already drifting through the open doorway. Harry let out a long breath, glancing up at his boyfriend. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Draco rolled his eyes. Harry kissed Draco again, feeling the weight of the moment. "I've spent the last 2 years waiting for this, Potter. Don't chicken out now. You're supposed to be the brave one." A slightly breathless laugh escaped Harry. Fair enough. It felt simple. All he had to do was walk through that door, and they would be free. They had friends at the party, Ginny and Neville, Blaise and Daphne. It would be fine. He steadied his shoulders, squeezed Draco's arm, and stepped forward. Slughorn's office had been magically expanded for the occasion, with walls draped in jewel-toned fabrics that created the illusion of a grand tent. The atmosphere was vaguely smoky, but the room was not nearly as crowded as it could have been if Slughorn had invited all his friends. As a result, every single person in the room turned to watch Harry and Draco enter together. "Harry, my boy!" Slughorn exclaimed, standing nearby in a velvet hat and matching smoking jacket. He nearly dropped his glass of port when he spotted Draco. "Well, well, Slytherins and Gryffindors getting along indeed." He chuckled, wiggling his bushy brows in a teasing manner. "You've been keeping a tight lid on this one, haven't you, my lad?" Harry felt a flush creep up his cheeks. Thankfully, Draco was a master at handling these situations. "Harry has so little of his private life kept truly private, Professor," he said earnestly. "I'm sure you can understand his desire to let our relationship grow without prying eyes." "Quite right, Mr. Malfoy. My. I had, of course, heard the rumours of the Black family reuniting after the death of Lord Malfoy. My condolences, Mr. Malfoy," Slughorn added hastily, but Draco shook his head. "Thank you, Professor, but there was little love lost between my father and me, or indeed between him and my mother. We are much happier without him forcing us both to stand at his side." The implication was clear. Neither of the remaining Malfoys agreed with the legacy of their family. Mother was thrilled to reconnect with her cousin Sirius, which certainly made things easier for Draco and me. But we had eyes for each other long before then. Draco winked, and Slughorn chuckled in response. "Say no more, lad. he teased, winking exaggeratedly. "Well, it's wonderful to have you both here. Please, enjoy the party. Ah, Miss Granger, good to see you." The only thing keeping Harry from spinning around to see Ron and Hermione's reactions to him being with Draco was Draco himself, who was guiding him away from Slughorn and over to the side. "Don't stare just yet," Draco warned in a low voice, skillfully manoeuvring them to a spot where they could easily see the door without drawing too much attention. Everyone was still staring at them, including Ron, who was blatantly ignoring Slughorn's attempts to engage him, his eyes fixed on the two of them. "You're far too good at this," Harry accused, making Draco smirk. "This is what I was raised with, darling. Lord Malfoy is always a master of the art of conversation." He brushed a stray curl off Harry's forehead. "Slughorn is an easy target to win over. Let him think he's privy to some great secret, and you've got him. I dare say we've made him the envy of his entire social circle by giving him such juicy inside knowledge before the gossip rags get hold of it." "Then I should have done this ages ago, if it'll win him over," Harry muttered. "Maybe now I'll finally get him to talk." Though about what he still wasn't quite sure. "I suppose we've been a bit lax on your pure-blood etiquette lessons, all things considered," Draco mused. "Once things quiet down, we'll need to pick that back up. You'll need to know how to handle people like Slughorn going forward." Harry groaned quietly. He had been perfectly content with those lessons being set aside in favour of more pressing matters, like how to defeat Dark Lords. Draco laughed. "Chin up, love. I'm sure I'll find a way to make it fun for you." His grey eyes darkened, and without thinking, Harry leaned in and kissed him. The room erupted in gasps and whispers. "Having fun, are we?" Daphne and Blaise appeared beside them, both looking far too amused by the scene. "I thought Becky Arncliffe was going to cry when she saw you two walk in together." Harry frowned and glanced over at the 7th-year Ravenclaw girl. "I've never spoken to her in my life." "No, but she's had a crush on Draco forever," Daphne said with a smirk. Harry blinked, feeling an unexpected flare of jealousy. That caught him off guard. He had never worried about this before. None of Draco's admirers had ever been as bold as his own. But of course there were people who fancied Draco. He was gorgeous, the perfect pureblood, obnoxiously wealthy, and the epitome of Slytherin. It made sense that people would be drawn to him more than to Harry. Strangely, Harry found himself relishing the idea of those admirers being disappointed to learn that Draco was taken. He never thought of himself as the possessive type, but tonight seemed to be a lesson in new feelings. Just then, Ginny and Neville sidled over, each holding a flute of what looked like champagne. "Have you seen Hermione's face? She looks like she's going to explode," Ginny said gleefully. "Also, Daphne, you look offensively gorgeous tonight. Those robes are amazing." "Thank you," Daphne replied, clearly pleased. "You two make a stunning couple. You should get a picture to send to your grandmother, Neville. Let her show off her handsome grandson to her bluff club." "I'm not even going to ask how you know about my grand's bluff club," Neville said, shaking his head. Suddenly, Harry remembered a conversation from what felt like a lifetime ago. In an abandoned classroom, Harry sat with Draco Malfoy, their friendship still delicate. He recalled being warned never to play Warlock's bluff with Daphne Greengrass, or she would rob him of everything he owned. He had insisted that he would never be in a position to play cards with her in the first place. How naive he had been. Trying to be discreet, Harry glanced over at Hermione and Ron, now that they had escaped Slughorn's grasp. Hermione looked like she might explode, or perhaps like she had just eaten something incredibly sour. The expression was surprisingly reminiscent of Aunt Petunia, and Harry had to stifle a laugh that threatened to escape. Beside her, Ron was as red as his hair with fury, though thankfully he was wearing a less hideous set of dress robes than he had for the Yule ball. He was glaring daggers at Harry and Draco, and Harry wondered if they would be brave enough to confront him about his choice in boyfriends, especially with so many people around. It wasn't just students in attendance. Several professors were mingling as well, glasses of something alcoholic in hand. Harry's eyebrows shot up at the sight of Professor Sinistra, standing with her hand low on Professor Babbling's back. The two women were chatting with their heads close together, in a way that could only be described as intimate. Was this new? Did everyone know about it? And had he missed the memo? He turned to Draco. "Did you know about Sinistra and Babbling?" he asked. Draco hummed, following his gaze. "What? Oh yes, those two have been together for ages now. Theo swears he once caught them snogging in the astronomy tower back in second year." "Theo's a filthy liar," Blay interjected. "It was a brief peck at best." "Maybe he didn't know the difference at the time," Ginny suggested. "I'm sure he does now," Neville agreed ruefully, which made Ginny giggle. Slughorn didn't seem to know quite what to do with himself now that they had. As everyone arrived, it was clear that Professor Slughorn had hoped for this party to be a much larger event, filled with impressive people to introduce them to. Harry, however, felt a wave of relief that it wasn't. This gathering was bearable, standing with his friends, sipping champagne from a silver tray carried by a house elf, and pretending the rest of the room didn't exist. It wasn't quite what he would call a party, but it was manageable. With Draco's arm around his waist, he could have tolerated much worse. At one point, Slughorn drifted toward their little group, appearing just as surprised by the pairing of Neville and Ginny as he was by Harry and Draco. Harry wondered if the professor was reconsidering Neville as he pulled the Gryffindor boy into a conversation about herbology. Not that Neville wanted to be reconsidered. "What about you then, Harry? Any grand plans for Christmas, or just hanging about the castle?" the professor asked, after Neville shared his plans for the greenhouse over the break. "Sirius and I are spending Yule with Draco and his mother," Harry replied, noticing Slughorn's moustache twitch at his deliberate mention of the wizarding holiday. "Well, that's marvellous. I haven't been to Malfoy Manor in many years. Your grandfather Abraxas used to throw quite the soirée back in the day," he said, chuckling at Draco. But then his expression grew sombre. "I never quite approved of the company, you know, but they were still excellent parties all the same. Such a shame about Abraxas. He was a bright lad, one of my best students. Then he fell in with young Riddle and, well," he shook his head as if trying to dispel the thoughts. "No use thinking about what once was." Harry's eyes widened, and he shot a discreet glance at Draco, urging him to keep the conversation flowing. "I didn't spend much time with my grandfather. He passed when I was quite young, as I'm sure you remember, but I do seem to remember he spoke highly of you. You were the Slytherin housemaster at the time, weren't you?" "Indeed I was," Slughorn confirmed, his eyes lighting up. "Back when I had a little more energy to spare." "Yes, he always spoke so fondly of his time as a Slytherin. I don't believe he ever mentioned anyone named Riddle, though. Was he a classmate?" Yes, but I suppose he wouldn't have called him that, now would he?" Slughorn reached for a fresh glass of wine from a nearby tray, his rosy cheeks growing even redder with each sip. "Now, there's a story of wasted potential if I've ever seen one. A young man who could have had everything if he'd only been a bit more polite about asking for it. I tried my best, I did, but there's only so much you can do with someone as determined as Tom Riddle. Across from him, Harry noticed Ginny's face turn pale, her hand gripping Neville's tightly. "Did this Riddle boy come to you for advice, then?" Harry asked tentatively, his heart racing. "I'd imagine you had plenty of it for someone with as much potential as you say he had." "Oh, I tried, but he wanted advice on matters it's not polite to discuss." Slughorn stroked his moustache, taking another sip of wine. No, I thought I could help him when he was young, but by the time he was set to graduate, he'd already gone too far down the wrong path. A terrible, terrible shame." He looked up at Harry, his gaze slightly unfocused. "I think old Albus is jumping at shadows when it comes to you, my lad, telling me to watch out for history repeating itself. Bah! He's looking for trouble where there isn't any. You've got a good head on your shoulders, Harry, my boy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." He blinked and shook his head, suddenly straightening up. "Good Lord, how much have I had? Drink? Listen to me, getting all sentimental. Being back in this castle does funny things to an old man's head." He chuckled, though the sound was a bit strained. "I think I'd better grab something to eat. You know, line the stomach and all that. I'll see you all later." With another awkward chuckle, he quickly retreated, and the six of them let out a collective sigh of relief once he was gone. "What on earth was that about?" Ginny hissed, her gaze fixed urgently on Harry. He pursed his lips, realizing that this conversation hadn't been nearly as revealing as he had hoped. "Dumbledore asked him back for a reason. I'm trying to figure out what it is," Harry replied. "And you think it has something to do with this Riddle guy?" Daphne asked, frowning. "Who is he, anyway?" "It's you-know-who's real name," Neville chimed in, surprising Harry. "Ginny told me," he added, noticing his friend's puzzled expression, "about the diary and everything." That made sense. "So Slughorn taught the Dark Lord when he was a child?" Blaise realized, watching the tipsy professor across the room. Harry nodded. "Yeah, and I think he taught him something he probably shouldn't have, but I can't figure out how to get him to tell me," he sighed, leaning against Draco. "Bugger! That was the closest I've gotten in ages." "There's plenty of time after Yule," Draco pointed out, brushing a kiss over Harry's cheek. "I doubt you'll get anything more out of him tonight, though." "Yeah, you're right." Harry frowned, but brightened at the sight of Ron glaring at him. "Well, at least the night wasn't a total waste. Ron's been so busy trying to shoot daggers at Draco with his eyes that he's ignored Hermione all night, and she doesn't look happy about it." Hermione was tugging on Ron's arm, trying to get him to dance with her, while a few couples swayed around the small dance floor. "That's a win if I've ever seen one," Harry said with a smirk. Ginny chuckled, shaking her head. "Count yourselves lucky. I have to spend all of Christmas with him. I can't even flew to Neville's with the network under watch." She pouted, and Neville leaned down to kiss her hair. "I'm sure one of your older brothers will apparate you," he suggested. "Yeah, be glad you're not stuck under apparition wards," Blaise added, looking distinctly unimpressed. He was staying at the castle for the holidays, and while Harry knew George planned to sneak in at least once, it couldn't be easy for them. "Do you think we've stayed long enough?" Harry asked, scanning the room critically. No one else had left yet, but that didn't mean they couldn't be the first. "I think if you stay long enough for Weasley to have one more glass of wine, you'll regret it," Daphne replied, nodding in Ron's direction. Harry grimaced. "Yeah, okay, we're leaving." "We can't all leave at once. Slughorn will notice," Neville said, then sighed. "Go on, you two, get out of here. We'll cover for you." "Knew I liked you for a reason, Longbottom," Draco remarked. Neville snorted. "I merely put up with you for Harry's sake," he replied cheerfully, feigning exasperation. "Will I see you back at the dorm, Harry?" "I think it'll annoy Ron more if I'm not around," Harry said with a grin. It was too good an opportunity to pass up. No one argued, and Harry smiled at the group. "Good night, then. Thanks for making this evening surprisingly entertaining. And if I don't see you before we leave, Merry Yule," he added, mostly to Blaise and Daphne, who returned the sentiment. With that settled, the two boys slipped away from the party hand in hand. Harry felt a bit bubbly from the champagne and leaned into Draco's side as they walked away, grinning to himself. "This time tomorrow we'll be back home, and the whole damned castle. I will know I'm in love with you," he declared happily. Draco smirked at him, his eyes warm. "Whatever shall we do until then?" he drawled, his voice deepening slightly and sending delightful shivers of arousal through Harry's body. "I can think of a few ideas." Abruptly, he pushed Draco back against the wall and kissed him fiercely, fingers tangling in the blonde's perfectly parted hair, delighting in the way he messed it up. He could do this now, snog his boyfriend in the middle of the corridors, without worrying about someone strolling by and spilling the news to the entire school. And oh, it felt amazing. "Let's go somewhere more private," Draco urged, breaking the kiss and taking Harry by the hand. "We can put a few of your ideas to the test." Harry didn't need to be asked twice. The castle responded by revealing a passage to the 7th floor behind a nearby tapestry. It had been one of Harry's cleverer ideas to keep the rest of the HA from knowing how to access the room of requirement outside of meetings. This meant it was almost guaranteed to be empty when he wanted to use it to enjoy some peace with his boyfriend. Certainly more comfortable than the chamber, at any rate. Despite what he had told Neville, Harry and Draco eventually returned to their dorms. They wanted to make a statement, but not the kind that involved showing up for breakfast in last night's dress robes. They parted ways long after their dorm mates had gone to sleep. The next morning, Harry made sure to leave Gryffindor Tower well before Ron woke up, his trunk packed and shrunk in his pocket. He wanted to delay that particular meltdown for as long as possible. As he strolled leisurely down to breakfast alone, he wondered how long it would take for the news to spread. It was already clear that a few people were in the know. Several students he passed began whispering to one another as soon as he walked by. Harry was surprised to see Lavender and the Patil twins sitting at the Gryffindor table when he arrived. The hall was sparsely occupied. With port keys to take instead of a train to catch, the students weren't as worried about being late. He joined the girls in their section of the table, allowing himself to look as satisfied as he felt. "So, how was the party then?" Parvati asked with a teasing tone. Harry winked at her. "I'm sure you've heard all about it already," he replied. The Indian girl grinned mischievously. "Hermione was furious when she got in last night," she confided. "I swear, Sophie had to hex her silent just so we could all get some sleep. Apparently, you and your boyfriend looked far too smug and handsome at the party last night." "Smug and handsome," Harry echoed with a chuckle. "That's him in a nutshell, yeah." All three girls giggled. Harry knew the twins were pretending the news was as fresh to them as it was to Lavender, so their friend wouldn't feel left out. "I can't believe you managed to keep that secret. I mean, I always thought there was a spark between you two, but I was never sure if it was just a hate-attraction sort of thing. And then you became friends, and I wasn't sure what to think," Lavender said, running her fingers through her curls. "How long has that been going on?" "How long do you think?" he shot back. She mock-scowled and lightly hit him on the arm. "Don't play with us, Harry," she pleaded. "Not after all we've done for you." "Not after all we can do for you, working damage control here while you're cozied up with your boy all Yule," Parvati added pointedly. She had a point, and they both knew it. If the rumours were left unchecked, Merlin only knew what they might come back to after Christmas. "Oh, all right then," he relented playfully. "Only because I can trust you." "I bet it was this summer," Lavender cooed, "once your godfather and his mum reconnected." "Earlier," Harry replied, watching as her eyes widened. "Really? Sometime in 5th year? He did help us out when Umbridge found the Dumbledore's army room, I suppose. Was it after that?" He shook his head. "Earlier." All three girls stared at him in shock. Even the Patil twins had no idea how long the relationship had been going on. They just knew about it longer than Lavender did. "More than a year?" Parvati pressed eagerly. "Was it the summer before last year?" Harry had kept them in suspense long enough. "4th year, day after the first task," he revealed, a goofy smile spreading across his face at the memory. The girls gasped in disbelief. "Never!" Padma exclaimed, stunned. "All that time and no one knew?" "Almost no one," Harry confirmed. "Fred and George knew almost from the beginning, and Neville figured it out after the Yule ball. Apparently I spent half the night staring at Draco's arse. Good thing no one else saw me, to be honest." "You've spent most of the last 3 years staring at my arse, Potter. I'm sure no one noticed the difference." Harry brightened immediately, looking up at his boyfriend. He hadn't heard Draco approach, nor had he noticed the entire hall fall silent as the Slytherin made his way toward the Gryffindor table. Ignoring the stares, Harry urged Draco to sit beside him and leaned in for a kiss, his heart racing and a smile threatening to take over his face. "Good morning," he greeted, feeling warm under Draco's fond gaze. "Good morning, love." "Ladies," Draco added, nodding to the 3 awe-struck girls. "I suppose you're grilling him for details, then, if he's talking about my arse." "You know me. Any excuse," Harry said, winking as he reached for the teapot, pouring Draco a cup without needing to ask. "You've been waiting for this moment for ages, haven't you, Harry?" Lavender remarked. Parvati smirked, her lips curling knowingly. "Merlin, you're practically glowing." "Wouldn't you be?" Harry replied, a smile spreading across his face. "It's like something out of a romance novel." Parvati sighed dreamily. "Star-crossed lovers from opposite houses, hiding their love for their own safety. Oh." She practically swooned, and Harry caught Draco's eye, trying to suppress a blush as he thought about the other kind of romance novel he had once compared their relationship to. "Oh, Merlin, I'll never escape it now," Neville groaned as he sank into the seat beside Padma, glaring tiredly at Harry and Draco. "Gone are the days when you two could only be disgustingly adorable in private." "Yep," Harry declared proudly, planting a kiss on Draco's cheek. "Sorry about it." "No, you're not." "No, I'm not," Harry agreed, unabashed. Draco sighed dramatically. "You're going to ruin my reputation," he lamented, which only made Harry grin wider. "You've known that for years, and yet here you are," Harry shot back playfully. The hall was getting busier, more people trickling down from breakfast. Anyone who hadn't heard the news about Harry and Draco was quickly filled in, their eyes darting straight to the pair at the Gryffindor table. Harry and Draco both tried to keep their reactions in check, but they didn't hide their affection either. Harry swiped a piece of Draco's toast and added a jam-sticky kiss to the blonde's lips. Draco leaned in closer, not shying away as more friends joined them at the table, many pretending to be surprised by the revelation. "So who won the betting pool, then?" Harry asked, and suddenly the group fell silent. "What betting pool?" Ginny asked, her tone just a touch too innocent. Draco snorted. "Daphne won it, of course. Really, all of you should know better than to let someone dating Luna enter a betting pool." "What? But she's your friend. She wasn't supposed to enter," Susan exclaimed. Daphne chimed in with a playful protest. "No one told me not to." She appeared as if summoned, her presence brightening the room. "You've made me a very rich lady, boys." Draco shot back quickly. "Buy us something nice for Yule and we'll call it even." A few people looked less than impressed, but they couldn't say anything without admitting that the reason they hadn't entered the betting pool was because they already knew who Harry was dating. Clearly, Daphne had no such morals holding her back. "Bloody Slytherins," Ernie muttered, rolling his eyes. Harry glanced at his watch, then frowned as he noticed Snape striding away from the head table. "We'd better get moving, love. We have a portkey to catch," he reminded Draco. "Don't want to be late," Draco agreed, neatly setting his cutlery down on his plate. "We'll see you all in the new year, then. Happy holidays." The table erupted with well wishes in return as the two boys stood to leave, making their way to the doors. As they passed behind Ron, the redhead jerked his elbow back, catching Harry in the leg. He glared up at his ex-best friend. "You really ditched us for him?" Ron asked, incredulous. "I didn't ditch you for him," Harry replied coolly. "I ditched you and found him, entirely unconnected. But honestly, Ron, you sound awfully jealous. Is that something Hermione should worry about?" With that bombshell, Harry practically skipped out of the hall, Draco's hand firmly in his. Their break was off to an excellent start. Leaning against the doorway of the conservatory, Sirius watched two figures zooming about on brooms over the pitch, a smile spreading across his face. He wrapped his chunky cardigan tighter around himself, feeling the winter chill. Snow blanketed the ground, at least 4 or 5 inches, with more expected overnight. The garden showed signs of a snowball fight that had been abandoned in favor of Quidditch. He didn't mind this kind of cold. It was the crisp, bright cold of winter, the kind that brought laughter and fun, and the cozy feeling of curling up by the fire with a mug of hot chocolate. Once everyone was exhausted and drenched in snow, it felt like the good kind of cold. It was even better knowing his pup was home. His boys, really. They had become a pair by now. With Remus and Severus being who they were, it made sense for him to just claim both and be done with it. He heard familiar footsteps approaching, and soon muscular arms wrapped around his hips, a warm chest pressing against his back. He sighed softly, leaning into the embrace, melting into Charlie as he always did. "Glad to have them home?" Charlie asked knowingly, placing a kiss on his cheek. Sirius hummed in affirmation. "I wish we could keep them here," he mused wistfully. The next 2 weeks would fly by. "You'd get sick of them eventually," Charlie teased. "Trust me, a full house isn't as fun as it sounds after 6 weeks stuck together. I used to beg to go back to Hogwarts early every summer." Sirius laughed, trying to imagine what it must have been like being the second oldest of 7, with so many siblings around all the time. He had only ever had Regulus and the occasional visiting cousins. "I don't know. A full house sounds nice these days," he mused, covering Charlie's hands with his own. "Before long, those two will finish school and be ready to move into their own place. I don't know what I'll do then." He was happy enough to move back into Grimmauld once it was safer. He had reclaimed the house from his horrific childhood, created better memories, and turned it into a home. But he doubted he could convince many people to move back with him. Remus and Severus would want their own place once they could go public. Narcissa would return to her manor, and it would just be him and Charlie rattling around that big old townhouse. "I'm sure we'll think of something to keep you occupied," Charlie assured him, "once we've gotten bored of having the place entirely to ourselves." A thrill of excitement ran down Sirius's spine at the thought. He thought about the future and what it might hold. He knew what he was getting into by falling for a Weasley. "It'll start getting dark soon," he said instead. "Want to grab our brooms and join them for a bit?" He turned and saw Charlie grinning, his cheeks dimpling. "I'd love to." Charlie kissed Sirius quickly. "You get the brooms and I'll get our coats." His blue eyes softened. "Don't want you catching a chill out there." Sirius smiled, watching him go. It felt impossible to be cold when Charlie was around, warming him from the inside out. Dinner that evening was a lively affair. The whole family gathered at Seren to celebrate the start of the holidays. Even the Tonks family and Kingsley were there. Harry couldn't be happier, surrounded by loved ones, enjoying delicious food, and cheerfully sharing the story of his and Draco's coming out right before they left school. "I just wish we'd been able to see Dumbledore's face, but he wasn't at breakfast," Harry said, shaking his head. "Ah, well, I'm sure he'll have something to say about it when we go back. And I'm sure he'll soon realize that hardly anyone gives a damn what he thinks anymore," Tonks declared with a grin. Sirius barked a laugh at her side. "Too right. You should have seen how many letters I received after the love potion incident. Parents whose kids had written home wanted to tell me they'd support our family if we pressured Albus into expelling the girl." "Really?" Harry asked, surprised. "Amortentia is serious business, cub. She's lucky she's underage, or it would be an automatic Azkaban sentence," Remus explained. "Horace is the lucky one," Snape sneered. "It's bad enough brewing Amortentia to show to students, but leaving it unsupervised long enough for a fourth year to steal some. He's fortunate he's ancient enough that the International Society Potions Masters can't be bothered to properly reprimand him for it," Snape said. "I didn't realize they regulated that sort of thing," Harry mused, and Snape nodded in response. "He's lost his license to brew it after this incident. Not that it's an enormous loss. I can't see him brewing it often, even for demonstration purposes. But now that it's on his record, he'll lose his mastery if he's caught with it again, or if any of his students are caught with it." "Do you think anyone else managed to steal some?" Draco asked. "Highly unlikely," Snape assured him. "He's an idiot, but he's not that incompetent. And after the spectacle the vain girl made of herself, anyone who might have some will think twice about using it." "Good," Harry declared vehemently, stabbing a roast potato. Under the table, Draco squeezed his knee sympathetically. "Enough about that," Sirius said, sensing the dip in the mood. "We've got 2 weeks of freedom ahead of us." He turned to Harry, grinning. "If it's all right with you, pup, we thought we'd do proper Yule celebrations this year, rather than the more Muggle Christmas." Harry beamed at him. That would be brilliant. There weren't many of the old ways he could follow while at school. Dumbledore didn't let anyone celebrate Samhain at the Stone Circle anymore, let alone anything else. And he'd been hoping they could work Yule celebrations into their family traditions, if Sirius was willing. He looked around the full dining room. There were far too many of them to keep eating in the kitchen on nights like this. This was his family, missing a few members, if he counted the other Weasley siblings he cared about, along with their partners. Even in his wildest dreams, while shut away in his cupboard and watching the Dursleys spoil Dudley every Christmas, Harry had never imagined he would ever have this many people who loved him. The world might be getting darker outside, the war escalating, but there was warmth here, surrounded by those he cherished. There was still plenty of joy in Harry's life. He had almost forgotten that, cooped up in the castle with Dumbledore and surrounded by those who glared at him, not to mention all those dreaded black envelopes. But now he had a whole 2 weeks of joy to look forward to. Chapter 92. Even after just a few days of Christmas break, Harry knew it would be incredibly hard to leave when it was time to return to Hogwarts. Still, he was determined to make the most of it, and his family was happy to oblige. They slipped back into their summer routine of spending evenings together in the main living room, playing chess or bluff, or simply sitting side by side with a good book. During the day, however, most of the household had work to do, leaving Harry and Draco to their own devices. That suited them perfectly. Knowing they would soon be back at school didn't lead either of them to think it would be any easier to spend time together privately. But not all their time was spent being hormonal teenagers, just some of it. The rest was filled with flying, studying, and getting into mischief. Right now they were focused on Draco's animagus form. The blonde was so close, and he was determined to master the transformation before they returned in January. Every free minute was spent in Harry's room, with Draco meditating, his eyes closed, as he searched for that elusive owl form. Harry didn't mind at all. He was eager to see Draco transform. In the meantime, he could indulge in a bit of daydreaming, staring at his boyfriend while Draco was too focused to notice. Usually, Draco didn't mind when Harry got bored and disrupted his concentration, provided Harry waited long enough for him to get in a decent attempt. This time, however, Draco hadn't been meditating for very long. Harry was entertaining himself by wandlessly levitating increasingly heavy objects, testing his limits. Just as he was wondering if levitating the bed he was sitting on would break Draco's concentration, the boy's body suddenly blurred. The next thing Harry knew, a snowy owl was perched on his bed. "Draco!" Harry jumped to his feet, the desk rattling as he did so. The owl hit the ground with a soft thud, hooting triumphantly. "You did it!" Harry beamed at his owl-shaped boyfriend, throwing himself onto the bed for a closer look. "Oh, you're gorgeous! Look at you!" Draco preened, allowing Harry to stroke gentle fingers along his feathers. He was larger than Hedwig, with wickedly sharp talons, and Harry couldn't help but smirk. "Mayhem indeed," he teased, earning a light glare from the owl. Draco would eventually accept the nickname. After all, he insisted that Harry caused more trouble than he did. While there was some truth to that, it was too late for that argument now. Draco spread his wings, showing off their impressive span, and gave a couple of unsteady hops. "You want to try flying?" Harry asked, and Draco nodded eagerly. "It's really windy outside, love. Maybe we should wait for a calmer day," Harry suggested, not wanting Draco to get hurt. "Let's practice getting in and out of the form first. Make sure you can transform back." The owl narrowed its eyes in a glare, but after a few moments Draco was human once more, kneeling on the mattress. Without hesitation, Harry pounced on him, pinning him down and kissing him. "I'm so proud of you," Harry exclaimed, watching as Draco grinned up at him. "It's so weird being a bird," Draco said, his tone a mix of confusion and awe. "I should show Mother. And Uncle Sev." "In a minute," Harry replied, peppering more kisses down the Slytherin's jaw. "I'm not done being proud of you yet." Draco snorted but didn't argue, splaying his knees slightly to cradle Harry between them. "If you must," he mock-sighed, biting at Harry's lower lip. "But then we're going to show everyone. And you have to teach me to fly. The ballroom's big enough for it." He gasped softly as Harry sucked on the sensitive spot on his throat. "Sounds like a plan," Harry agreed, grinning against Draco's skin. Draco's skin was warm against Harry's. Snape was brewing in the lab, so they had some time to kill before Draco could show off his new form. Years of experience kept Severus's hand steady as he poured fresh-brewed nerve tonic into a vial, despite the burning pain from the mark on his forearm. He gritted his teeth against it, focusing on finishing his work. At least the summons had come at the end of his brewing session, rather than interrupting him in the middle. He hated ruining his work because of the Dark Lord. Once everything was safely stored, he summoned his robe and mask, sweeping out of the lab. In the main hallway he spotted Sirius, who grimaced at the sight of Severus buttoning his dark robe. "I'll let Moony know. Be safe," Sirius offered. Severus merely nodded before heading briskly down the darkened driveway, his footsteps muffled by the snow. The mark burned hotter and more urgently. It felt almost involuntary to follow its call once he passed the wards. When he arrived, he was taken aback by the larger gathering than he had expected, and his heart began to sink. "At last, Severus," the Dark Lord drawled, beckoning him closer. "I was beginning to think you would not arrive." "Apologies, my lord," Severus murmured, bending to kiss the hem of the monster's robes. "I was in the middle of a sensitive potion. It had to be stabilized before I could leave." "Indeed." The response was non-committal, and Severus braced himself for a Cruciatus, but it never came. "No matter. You are here now. We can leave." "Leave, my lord?" Voldemort's thin lips twisted into a dangerous smile. "They keep you so busy at that castle. I'm sure you have plenty of frustrations with those brats, especially with the Potter boy, so close yet unable to harm him. And the Malfoy boy. You must be so disappointed in his choices." Severus expertly pushed back all his pride and love for Draco, burying them behind his occlumency. Severus scowled, allowing his frustration to surface. "You've heard about his romance with Potter, then, my lord," he replied, attempting to mask his feelings with a tone of utter disgust. Red eyes blazed in response. "They will both be destroyed in due time," the Dark Lord promised. "For now, however, I offer you another outlet for those frustrations." Severus's heart sank further as he heard the eager whoops of several Death Eaters behind him, with Bellatrix Lestrange's laughter ringing the loudest. "You honor me, my lord," he managed to say. The Dark Lord's face twisted into a grotesque expression of glee, and when he extended his arm, Severus had no choice but to take it. In an instant, they reappeared in what looked like a perfectly ordinary Muggle neighborhood. It seemed fairly affluent, middle class, not overly fancy, but certainly nicer than where he had grown up. Several houses glowed with lights, families nestled inside, watching television on that winter evening. Colorful lights adorned many of the exteriors, creating a cheerful scene. Peaceful. But that peace wouldn't last long. A series of cracks announced the arrival of the rest of the Death Eaters, at least 20 of them. Voldemort had started bringing larger groups on these missions in recent months, especially since the Order had been thwarting them so effectively. If only there were a way for Severus to alert them now, without compromising his cover. "Enjoy yourselves, my loyal subjects," Voldemort instructed, raising his wand. "You have earned it." Then chaos erupted. Instantly, one of the houses burst into flames. The Death Eaters around him fanned out, shouting and cackling as they blew up cars and ravaged gardens. A few curious, or foolish, Muggles stepped out of their homes, some brandishing knives, cricket bats, or, in one case, an umbrella. They all paused in their doorways, staring in disbelief at the terrifying spectacle unfolding before them, before screams filled the air as their world descended into pandemonium. The torture began. Severus forced himself not to think. He had a facade to maintain. His own life was at stake. He made a beeline for a house that had not yet been claimed by his fellow Death Eaters, blasting the door open with an unnecessarily dramatic flourish. Perhaps if he was loud enough, the Muggles inside would flee before he reached them. But that was not the case. He found 3 of them huddled upstairs in the smallest bedroom, a man, a woman, and a young child. Bile rose in Severus's throat, but he pushed it down. They wouldn't survive the night, no matter what he did. Had he been younger, more naive, he might have concocted an elaborate ruse for them to feign death until the danger passed. But he knew better now. The best he could offer them was a quick, painless death. 3 flashes of green light, and the room fell hauntingly silent. Severus gritted his teeth and got to work, his magic slicing into their skin and tugging at their clothes, twisting the child's neck at an unnatural angle. If he executed his task well enough, none of his companions would realize that all the damage had been done post-mortem. Just in case, he set fire to the child's bed, letting the flames leap from one polyester stuffed toy to the next, catching the corner of the curtains and melting the brightly colored plastic plaything beneath. He turned away, confident that the whole room would be reduced to ashes before anyone could intervene. If only his night could end there. Stepping back out into the cold street, he saw that the other Death Eaters had rounded up a cluster of muggles, jeering as they huddled together, crying. Many of them lay dead on the outskirts of the group, those who had dared to fight back, perhaps. "Come, Severus," Bellatrix cackled, her mask discarded, her features alight with ecstasy as she held a muggle under the Cruciatus curse. "Pick one. Pretend it's that foul brat of Sissa's." "Look, there's a blonde one for you," Bellatrix exclaimed, jerking her wand. A teenage boy was suddenly separated from the group. He appeared slightly younger than Draco, with hair a shade darker, but the similarities were enough to almost shatter Severus's composure. He gritted his teeth, raised his wand, and tried not to meet the boy's gaze. "Sectum sempra," he called out sharply. No one would fault him for using his signature spell, the very creation he had once taken pride in as a teenager. Deep gashes appeared across the boy's chest, and Severus ensured the magic cut deep enough. The boy was dead in less than a second. A wail erupted from the crowd. Perhaps it was a mother. Beside him, Bellatrix pouted dramatically. "That's no fun," she cried, sounding like a child denied her toys. "You're supposed to make it last." "Forgive me," Severus drawled, maintaining his cool facade. "My temper seems to have overtaken me. As you suggested, I was imagining the Malfoy boy." Bellatrix cackled, her grin revealing a bloodthirsty delight. "It's so easy to slip, isn't it? They're so weak." She fired a cutting curse into the huddle, and a scream echoed in response. "You'll have to do better with the next one, Sevi. You've been out of the game for far too long." The Dark Lord didn't often send Severus on raids like this. His position at the school and his skills as a potions master made him far too variable to risk on a bit of muggle slaughter. Clearly, the Dark Lord thought Severus deserved a reward. Or perhaps he was so confident in his control over the Ministry that he believed it wouldn't matter if Severus got caught. Severus braced himself for another round, his mind racing to think of how he could make this next one more torturous. Suddenly, a shout of alarm pierced the air, and it wasn't from the muggles. "Orders coming!" someone warned, their voice magically amplified. "Scatter!" Severus felt a wave of relief wash over him, but there was no time to linger on it. The Death Eaters around him began to apparate away, many of them launching one last deadly curse at the group of muggles before vanishing into thin air. He turned on the spot, picturing Voldemort's manor, and with a tight squeeze in his chest, he was gone. Privately, he hoped Bellatrix would linger just long enough to get caught, long enough for one of the Order to take her down. But he doubted it. She was far too clever, even in her madness. Sure enough, she returned just moments after him, holding something that dripped blood onto the floor. It took Severus a moment to realize it was the decapitated head of the blonde muggle boy he had killed. "Picked out an early Christmas present for myself," she declared proudly, lifting the trophy high. "Do you like it?" "Charming," he replied flatly. She giggled, then straightened as the Dark Lord strode into view before the gathered crowd. Severus hadn't counted, but it seemed there were fewer of them than when they had started. Good. One day we shall show Dumbledore's precious order just how powerless they are to stop our glorious future, Voldemort remarked in his chilling, sibilant voice. For now, we will let them clean up our messes and think they are succeeding. A few cheers erupted, but were quickly silenced by a glare from his red eyes. "Severus," the monster called, and Severus stepped forward obediently, trying to calm the frantic beating of his heart. "You seemed unenthusiastic. Did you not enjoy your reward?" "I enjoyed it deeply, my lord," he replied, bowing his head. "I am very grateful for the opportunity. It has been so long. I wanted to take in the atmosphere before I dirtied my hands." The Dark Lord smirked, and Severus knew that his words would not be enough. Crucio. He fell to his knees, screaming. Nerves felt like 100,000 acid-coated knives, and the pain stretched on so long that he thought he might not survive it. When it finally ceased, he gasped for breath, his muscles trembling with the lingering aftershocks. "You disappoint me, Severus. I cannot have one of my best men losing his touch now, can I?" Voldemort drawled, eliciting chuckles from the crowd. "Next time I will do better, my lord," Severus rasped, keeping his gaze fixed on the floor, bracing himself for another curse. Anticipating it didn't make it any easier to endure. "The school has made you soft," his master continued, "but no matter. Before long we will have the school much as we have the ministry, and you will be free to truly indulge yourself." Severus had not heard anything about a plan to take Hogwarts, and a surge of terror shot through his trembling form. Was there a scheme in motion that he wasn't aware of? Or was the Dark Lord merely pontificating about his vague and glorious vision for the future? He hoped it was the latter. He didn't want to contemplate the implications of the former. Painfully and carefully, he dragged himself to his feet, trying not to stagger too obviously as they were all dismissed. He couldn't show weakness here, not if he wanted to survive. Summoning all his remaining strength, he focused on thoughts of home and apparated away, collapsing to his knees over the ward boundary of Seren. "Oh, Master Severus!" Kerry gasped, and his vision blurred as a small hand gripped his arm, the strange sensation of elf transportation washing over him, sending another wave of aftershocks through his body. "Fuck! Severus!" That was Remus, and Severus recoiled from the familiar touch. He couldn't allow it. He was filthy. He was a murderer. Remus shouldn't touch him. "Kerry, get the nerve tonic, highest strength," Remus instructed. A moment later, a vial was pressed against Severus's lips. He swallowed clumsily, the potion working instantly. Burning pain coursed through Severus, and he trembled as his heart rate began to normalize. His foggy vision gradually cleared, bringing Remus's handsome face into focus just a foot away, those amber eyes filled with worry and love, making Severus ache. "What happened?" Remus asked softly. "Muggle hunting," Severus croaked, fighting to keep the contents of his stomach down through sheer force of will. "He thought I needed a reward for putting up with the students and Dumbledore. He was not pleased with my performance. Apparently, I've lost my touch." Remus's face twisted in fury, and for a moment Severus's heart stopped, fearing that anger was directed at him. But then Remus's features softened. Not pity, never pity, but something close enough to make Severus's heart clench. "Come on, love. Let's get you out of those robes and into a nice hot bath. Can you stand? Can I help you up?" Severus flinched. "I've killed 4 muggles tonight," he said flatly. 2 of them were children. Remus flinched too, a small movement he couldn't hide from Severus's keen eyes. "I'm sure you gave them a cleaner death than anyone else would have allowed them," he replied, his voice steady, with not a trace of doubt. What had Severus done to deserve such unwavering loyalty? "Come here," the werewolf urged, his voice cracking, his heart breaking, much like Severus's own, just as it always did on nights like this. An endless cycle, one the foolish wolf wouldn't escape from, no matter how often Severus begged him to leave, insisting he deserved better. But Severus was too tired to be noble right now. He collapsed into Remus's waiting arms, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Remus held him close, cried with him, and gently eased him up the stairs, out of his robes and into the bath. He didn't judge Severus's murderous hands. He simply held them lovingly and kissed his palms, murmured his devotion, understanding, and assurances that he would always be there to help Severus pick up the pieces of his shattered self. He didn't promise it would never happen again. After all, that was a promise none of them could make. Just 7 more months. 7 months until Harry turned 17, until it could finally be over, one way or another. He could manage 7 more months of this. As long as he had Remus by his side, he could endure far worse. It was the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, except for Sirius, padding barefoot down the stairs in search of his wayward partner. Everyone else had gone to bed, and with the strength of the silencing charm on Harry's room, Sirius knew better than to expect everyone was actually sleeping. He had gone up to shower, fully expecting his gorgeous boyfriend to be waiting on the bed for some playful antics behind a silencing charm of their own, only to find their room empty. Charlie had been quieter lately. He was trying to hide it, but Sirius could tell. He found the dragon tamer in the kitchen, cradling a mug of tea in his large hands. When Charlie looked up at Sirius's entrance, his face turned sheepish. "Hey, I was on my way up, He trailed off, shaking his head and smiling lopsidedly. "Never mind," Sirius snorted, relieved they weren't going to waste time on feeble excuses. He shuffled forward and perched on the edge of the table beside the shorter man, pressing their shoulders together. "Talk to me." Charlie sighed, tilting his head to lean against Sirius's. When I lived in Romania, I knew I'd miss family Christmas most years. I was single, no kids. I was the natural choice to stay on the reserve over the holidays. It didn't bother me. But I'm not in Romania anymore. I can't kid myself into thinking I'm missing family Christmas because I can't get there. I wasn't invited. My own bloody mother doesn't want me there. Sirius broke off, his breath hitching, and he felt a deep ache for Charlie. He turned and wrapped an arm around Charlie's back, kissing his temple gently. "I'm sorry, love. This is my fault." "Don't even start," Charlie interrupted stubbornly. "The only thing you ever did was love me, and don't you dare apologize for that. This is on her. She's had it out for you long before we got together. Whatever she thinks she is to Harry, you threatened that, and she hates you for it. Part of me hates her for that, a little. For stealing from him, for lying to that poor kid who just wanted to be loved, for treating you like garbage. When I was younger, I always thought my mum was perfect." He gave a bitter snort. "I know better now. I love you, Sirius, and I love being here with you. I'm honored to be part of your Yule celebrations. You've made me part of your family, and that's amazing. I'm not saying I don't want to be here, but You miss your family, Sirius finished for him. Fuck, Charlie, of course you do. Your relationship with your mother might be difficult, but you've still got your dad and the rest of your siblings, even if Ron is a little Burke. Charlie let out a tearful snicker. I wish I knew how to make it all better, love, Sirius murmured, running a hand through Charlie's hair and tucking his head under his chin. Sometimes he felt ancient compared to his boyfriend, but this wasn't about age. It was about Sirius's own years of experience dealing with parents who hated him. He'd pretended it didn't bother him as a kid, but James had always seen through that act in an instant. He couldn't imagine what it was like for Charlie to grow up in a loving family, only to see it fall apart as an adult. Things will get better, he promised, once the war's over. Once they stopped having to live in Seren for their own safety, Sirius spoke gently. Once Dumbledore is gone, Molly will have to face the consequences of her actions. I can't promise your mother will come around, but when it's all over, at least you'll have the rest of your family with you. He leaned down and kissed Charlie's fiery hair. Next year we'll celebrate Yule at the Pottery. Invite all your siblings over for dinner. The thought of it filled him with excitement. It would be chaos, but they would cherish every moment. That would be nice, Charlie replied softly. I know things will be different. We're all getting older. Bill will be married next year, and even the kids are pairing off like nobody's business. Soon we'll be alternating family holidays, starting our own traditions, and we might not even bother with the big family gathering at the Burrow anymore. But this year, he sighed, and Sirius tightened his embrace. This year he was missing it, not because he was busy or had other plans, but because Molly didn't want to see him as long as he was with Sirius. Guilt pooled within Sirius, but he pushed it aside. He had already spent enough time trying to convince Charlie not to get involved with him. It was too late for second thoughts. He was far too deep now. Think of this year as a fresh start, he suggested, nudging Charlie to meet his gaze. We'll start our own traditions, just like you said. This is the first Christmas that Harry and I are having here. It's the first Yule I've experienced since Jamie died, and it's the first one that Moony and Severus have been able to spend together in I don't even know how long. And let's not even get started on the Malfoys' Yule traditions. He pressed a soft, tender kiss to Charlie's cheek, then his lips. I'm not trying to replace your family. Next year, we'll have a home where all your siblings, and your dad too, will be welcome. He paused, knowing he couldn't make any promises about Molly. And if you want to see them tomorrow, you're more than welcome to. But if it helps, think of this as the beginning of our family, rather than missing out on yours. He wasn't sure if that was even remotely helpful, but it was all he could think to say. Personally, he was overjoyed with how the Yule period had been going so far, but he knew it wasn't that simple for Charlie. He hadn't felt the heartache during their Yule dinner and rituals on the solstice. The Weasleys hadn't celebrated Yule in generations. But now, with the novelty fading and Christmas just around the corner, Charlie was clearly starting to feel the weight of separation. Slowly, a smile crept across Charlie's gorgeous face. The dimples didn't show, but it was much better than the sadness that had flickered in his eyes just moments ago. The beginning of our family, Charlie repeated. The words made Sirius's heart stutter in a way it hadn't when they'd first come out of his own mouth. Our family. I liked the sound of that. When Charlie leaned in to kiss him, Sirius melted into it, their tongues twining lazily together. I love you so much, Charlie breathed, sending warmth all the way to the tips of Sirius's toes. Let's go to bed, Sirius suggested, a slight smile on his face. before Kerry comes down to scold us for sitting on tables." Charlie snickered, hopping down and tugging Sirius with him, setting his cold mug of tea aside. The house elf was giving them privacy, bless her, but Sirius didn't want to push their luck. After all, she had a lot of food to prepare for tomorrow. He tangled his fingers with Charlie's, leading the way to the stairs. His thoughts were now simple, just cuddling with his love until they fell asleep. He couldn't do anything about Molly, but he could make sure Charlie had the best Christmas possible. Waking up on Christmas morning at Seren wasn't the same as at Hogwarts or even the Weasleys. There was no pile of presents at the end of his bed. All the gifts were under the tree in the living room. But there was a warm Draco curled tightly around him, and in Harry's opinion, that was far better than any present. He ran a hand through Draco's blonde hair, gently nudging him awake. "Hey, sleepy," Harry teased. "Get up, it's Christmas." Grey eyes blinked hazily, and Harry couldn't resist the urge to kiss those softly pouting lips. "Good morning," he said. "What time is it?" Draco asked suspiciously. Harry chuckled. 7:30. Not too obscene, I promise. Harry was definitely more of an early riser than Draco. The Slytherin would sleep until noon most days of the holidays if they let him. Draco groaned anyway, burrowing his face into Harry's neck. Harry laughed, rolling them over to pin Draco playfully to the mattress. "Come on, it's Christmas," he wheedled. "The sooner we get up, the sooner there are presents." That perked Draco up a little. "Only once everyone else is up," he pointed out. "No one is allowed to touch their presents until Mother has had her coffee." Considering Sirius's childhood festivities had been almost as depressing as Harry's, they were modelling their new family traditions on the Malfoy household's way of celebrating the winter season, namely, celebrating both Yule and Christmas. According to Sirius and Remus, the Potters had done something similar. The solstice featured the burning of the Yule log, a traditional dinner of roast boar, and the midnight ritual to strengthen magic on the longest night, while asking for blessings to help them through the deepest part of winter. Then, Christmas Day would hold gift-giving and another big dinner in the traditions Harry was more familiar with. As far as he was concerned, it meant double the celebrations, so Harry was more than happy to adopt this form of holiday cheer. The Yule ritual had been a real eye-opener. His magic still felt like it was buzzing a little even now. Suddenly, there was a loud knock on the door, startling both boys. "I hope you're decent," came the voice from outside. All the warnings Sirius had given them before opening the door echoed in Harry's mind, and he couldn't help but laugh. If they hadn't been safe, the dog Animagus would never have made it through Harry's wards, and they both knew it. "Merry Christmas, boys," Sirius exclaimed. "Merry Christmas, Sirius," Harry chirped brightly as he rolled off Draco and pulled himself into a sitting position. Draco, however, just bellied his face against Harry's hip, making them both laugh. "Come on, kiddo," Sirius teased, playfully tugging at Draco's leg beneath the duvet. "Kerry's got breakfast going and coffee brewing." Fine, I'm getting up," Draco relented with a yawn. "I expect you both down in 10 minutes, all right?" Sirius instructed, grinning mischievously. "Don't get distracted." In response, Harry tossed a pillow at him, sending the laughing man out of the room. With thoughts of delicious food and presents, they didn't linger in bed for long, slipping into their dressing gowns over their pyjamas. Apparently, Lucius Malfoy had insisted that everyone be fully dressed for Christmas breakfast, but that was one aspect of the tradition the remaining Malfoys were happy to toss aside. When they reached the kitchen, it was bustling, filled with incredible smells. Sure enough, Narcissa was there, cradling a mug of strong coffee in her hands, looking unfairly elegant in a silver velvet dressing gown over her blue silk pyjamas. Harry decided it must be something in the black jeans. Even Sirius, with his hair loose and wearing a grey t-shirt and red plaid pyjama bottoms, looked the kind of attractively dishevelled that Harry could never quite pull off. Season's greetings were exchanged, and then the group moved to the living room, where a staggering pile of presents awaited beneath the elaborately decorated Christmas tree. Sirius and Narcissa had truly gone all out. The two of them, left unsupervised, formed a dangerously competent team. "Go on, boys," Narcissa prompted, smiling indulgently as she gestured to the pile. Harry and Draco needed no second invitation. They hurried to kneel by the pile of presents, levitating gifts toward their rightful owners. The next half-hour erupted into a delightful chaos of wrapping paper and joyous exclamations. Harry's eyes widened as he surveyed his own mountain of gifts, books, clothes, sweets, and all sorts of surprises he never even dreamed of. "One of these days you're going to run out of things to buy me," he said with a laugh, unwrapping another box from his godfather's. Inside he found an astronomy globe, a marvelous device that would project the stars of any given day onto the walls of his room. Sirius would never let him forget that E he received in astronomy. "Not possible," Sirius replied, beaming with pride. "We'll just have to get more creative as you get older." Harry nearly made a joke about Sirius eventually having his own kids to spoil instead of him, but he thought better of it. He knew Charlie was a bit sensitive about family matters these days, and he didn't want to put his foot in it. He glanced over to see Draco opening a patchwork quilt from Andromeda, much like the one she had made for Harry, but this one was in shades of green instead of black and grey. "Oh, good! I can have my blanket back now," Harry teased, planting a kiss on Draco's cheek. Ever since Harry had brought the quilt to Draco when he was unwell, it had remained in the blonde's dormitory. Harry didn't mind, though. He was glad it brought comfort to his boyfriend. Suddenly, Remus burst into a loud gale of laughter, drawing everyone's attention to Snape, who was holding a wooden sign attached to a ribbon that read, "Brewing in progress. Intruders will be diced and used as ingredients." Beneath the text was a little cartoon cauldron with a human leg sticking out of it. "Where the hell did Tonks find that?" Remus exclaimed, delight written all over his face. Snape, however, didn't seem nearly as amused, though Harry thought he caught a flicker of amusement in those dark eyes. "I bet Ted made it," Sirius added with a grin. Harry offered, grinning. "He does all kinds of woodwork and stuff. Perhaps this will mean I actually get some privacy in this house," Snape drawled, earning a scoff from Narcissa. "There is only one person in this house who dares interrupt your brewing without good reason, and I would like to see you turn him into ingredients." Her gaze landed pointedly on Remus, and a pale flush rose to Snape's cheeks. "Not many potions call for werewolf parts," Remus assured cheerfully, giving a wink. As the piles of unwrapped gifts grew higher and the shreds of wrapping paper began to take over the remaining floor space, Sirius set a record of Muggle Christmas songs on the player, declaring it was time for eggnog. Apparently, even in the Black family traditions, it was standard to start getting drunk before noon. Harry looked over his own pile, feeling a small pang in his chest at one glaring absence. He glanced at Charlie. He, too, was missing the annual Weasley jumper. The redhead caught Harry's eye, his blue gaze turning knowing, with a smile tightening at the corners. Getting to his feet, Harry moved to claim Sirius's vacated seat beside Charlie, squeezing him around the waist. "I'm sorry. Charlie's huge arm slung across Harry's shoulders. "Not your fault, kid," he insisted. "She'll come around." He gave a short, somewhat hollow laugh. "Merlin, she sent a jumper to Percy, even when he told the whole damn family to go screw themselves in favour of the Ministry. Nice to know where we stand, eh?" He ruffled Harry's hair and then stood up. "Don't worry about it, Harry. No need to let her being petty ruin our day, yeah?" As the dragon tamer wandered over to assist Sirius in pouring eggnog, tugging him into a playful dance as soon as he was done, Harry smiled to himself. Charlie was right. There was way too much happiness around him to let Mrs. Weasley spoil it. He was spending Christmas with Draco. More importantly, he was surrounded by friends and family who cared. Draco and Narcissa were grateful they didn't have to spend the holiday with Lucius and a group of Death Eaters. Remus and Snape could enjoy the day together, and Harry could be with them and Sirius. The Tonks would be joining for dinner later, and he'd get to see his friends and the rest of the Weasleys he cared about at New Year's. He chuckled as Sirius dramatically dipped Charlie, both of them nearly spilling their eggnog. They knew they couldn't have everyone together for Christmas, not with how their family had grown, but this was a fantastic start. Dinner, which began promptly at 1 in the afternoon under Kerry's watchful eye, was a lively and joyful occasion. It was different from a Weasley Christmas dinner, but it was no less filled with love and laughter, especially with Tonks at the table. There was no way Charlie could feel down with his best friend beside him, cracking jokes and nearly spilling the gravy all over herself. By the end of the meal, he felt stuffed to the brim, his heart equally full as he watched Harry attempt to trap Remus and Severus under enchanted mistletoe. "You're going to end up with detentions if you're not careful," Tonks teased, making Harry snort. "I already have regular detentions with him," Harry pointed out. "You have training sessions disguised as detentions," Snape interjected, igniting the mistletoe with a flick of his wand. "I can always convert them to actual detentions if you miss them so much. There are plenty of cauldrons that need scrubbing, even though I no longer teach the subject." Harry grimaced and quickly placed his hands in his lap. Across the room, Remus chuckled. When the Tonks family started hinting about leaving, Charlie moved over to Sirius and kissed his partner's cheek. "I'm going out for a bit," he said quietly. Sirius's grey eyes twinkled with understanding. "Want someone to come with you?" Charlie knew that if he asked, Sirius would join him, even if it would be a complete disaster. In fact, any of them would stand by his side. Tonks, Remus, even Narcissa would gladly support him as he faced his mother. But he couldn't ask that of them. "Nah, I think it's best if I go alone. I won't be long," he said. The dog, Animagus, frowned slightly but nodded, pressing a chaste kiss to his cheek. "Send a Patronus if you need me. Give the family my love," Sirius replied. "Will do." Charlie lingered just long enough to see off their guests before slipping away while the kids were busy cajoling Narcissa into a game of bluff. Outside, the air was brisk compared to the warmth inside, and he hunched his shoulders as he made his way to the ward line, his heart pounding in a staccato rhythm in his chest. He never thought he'd feel this anxious about returning to his own family home. With a pop, Charlie apparated to the gate of the burrow. He paused, staring up at the familiar lopsided structure that he had grown up in, always looking as if a strong wind might blow it down. Home. Was it still home now? Even during his time in Romania, the burrow had felt like home. But this past year... When he thought of home, he thought of family, yes, but mostly he thought of grey eyes and a bark-like laugh, of the warm welcome he received whenever he stepped through the doors of Seren. His stomach churned at the thought. But he wasn't a Gryffindor for nothing. He had faced dragons. He could handle his mother. Taking a deep breath, he walked toward the house and knocked on the front door. Charlie could hear the bustle of his family on the other side, the sound of his mother calling for someone to answer, then yelling at the twins to stop whatever mischief they were up to. He heard Ginny laughing. When the door opened, he found himself face to face with his father, who practically crumpled in relief at the sight of him. "Oh, Charlie," he sighed, wrapping his second eldest son in a crushing hug. It took everything Charlie had to hold back the flood of emotions that surged within him. Charlie struggled not to break down in tears right there. "I hoped you'd stop by," his father said gently. I wasn't sure if I should," Charlie admitted. "I didn't know if I'd be welcome. Mum didn't send a jumper." Heartbreak flashed across Arthur Weasley's face. "My boy," he murmured, patting Charlie's cheek. "Your mother is upset, but you will always be welcome in this house, you hear me? No matter what." His gaze turned pointed. "As will Sirius Black." Charlie grimaced. "I don't know about that," he muttered, imagining how that might unfold. "Arthur, who is it?" came the call from inside the house. Arthur looked back at his son. "Are you coming in? Everyone will be pleased to see you." In that moment, Charlie felt a surge of affection for his dad, grateful for how he phrased it like a question, offering him one last chance to turn around and avoid the fallout. He almost took it. "I've come this far," he said instead, and his dad smiled, stepping back to let him inside. "We have a visitor, Molly," Arthur announced, and Charlie heard the frantic scramble from within as everyone tried to guess who it might be. He followed his dad into the kitchen, stopping at the threshold with his hands clenched tightly at his sides. The family was just finishing their Christmas dinner, a mostly eaten Christmas pudding at the centre of the table. Charlie felt as if he were having an out-of-body experience, looking in at his siblings gathered around the table without him. The only break in the sea of red hair was Hermione at Ron's side, and Fleur tucked under Bill's arm, both staring at him wide-eyed. Molly froze at the sink. "Hi, everyone," Charlie greeted awkwardly. Merry Christmas. Thought I'd just pop in." "Charlie," Ginny exclaimed, breaking the tension as she jumped to her feet and launched herself at her favourite brother. Charlie hugged her close, his nose pressed to her strawberry-scented hair. Merlin, he'd missed her. That was the trigger. For the rest of the family, the twins hugged him tightly, relishing the fact that they were now taller than him. Bill playfully ruffled Charlie's hair as if he were 12 again, and pressed a kiss to his temple. "Good to see you, Char," he murmured softly. Fleur joined in, wrapping her arms around him and kissing both of his cheeks, thanking him for the bracelet he had sent her. Even Ron gave him a clap on the shoulder, though he looked a bit uncomfortable. Throughout the warm greetings, Charlie noticed his mother remained still, her expression tense. "I would have thought you'd have other places to be today," she said tersely, once the noise settled down, and Charlie allowed himself to be persuaded into having a small slice of pudding. He winced at her tone. "I wanted to see everyone, but if you'd prefer, I can leave." "No one is leaving," Arthur interjected firmly, placing a reassuring hand on Charlie's arm. "We're delighted to have you here, as long as you're willing to stay." Molly's lips tightened, but she didn't argue. Charlie wasn't quite sure what he had expected, maybe for her to scream at him, or to pull out a jumper and apologize profusely. He forced his gaze away, smiling at his siblings instead. "Harry and everyone send their love," he said. "And he loves the pranks you sent him," he added, looking at the twins, who exchanged smirks. "I don't know if the rest of us are quite so grateful, mind you," he continued, "It's market research," Fred insisted cheerfully. "We can always give you something to get back at him with," George suggested. "I'll keep that in mind," Charlie replied, unsure if more pranks were the solution to that particular problem. "I suppose you're staying with the Malfoys, then?" his mum chimed in. "We've all heard the news. If you're with him, you must be with them." "You can say his name, you know, Mum," Charlie retorted. "But yes, Sirius and I are spending the holidays with the Malfoys. And Harry and Remus, of course." He decided not to mention that they weren't actually staying at Malfoy Manor. "Well, Sirius ought to be careful about the—" Molly replied, her tone sharp. "You should consider the kind of people he's letting influence poor Harry." "Here we go again, Mum," George warned, but she huffed in response. "So it's silly of me to be suspicious of people who have spent the last few decades supporting you-know-who," she challenged. "People who have made a point of tearing down our family at every opportunity." "That was only ever Lucius," Charlie defended. "That's not true. Malfoy has had it out for us since we started school," Ron shot back, his voice rising. "I don't know what he's got over Harry, but he's always been a git." "He was 11, Ron," Ginny retorted. "He's grown up since then, which is more than I can say for you." "Now, Charlie, you can't seriously think it's normal how quickly Harry has gone from being practically part of our family to refusing to talk to Ron," Molly exclaimed. "He was so rude to me last year when we were all at headquarters. He's ignoring Professor Dumbledore, too. I can't be the only one worried about his behaviour. His friendship with the Malfoy boy can't lead to anything good." "He was rude because he knows you stole from him, Mum," Charlie blurted out in frustration. Silence enveloped the room. Charlie's eyes widened in horror, Bill and the twins mirroring his shocked expression, while the rest looked utterly confused. "What?" Arthur stammered, bewildered. "Charlie, what do you mean?" He knew he shouldn't have said anything, but it was too late to take it back now. "Dumbledore gave Mum Harry's vault key every summer, and she stole money from his account. Multiple times," he confessed, locking eyes with his mother. "Harry found out about it ages ago. He didn't want you to know he knew, didn't want to cause trouble in the family. But I can't just sit here and listen to you talk about how concerned you are about him, when you were perfectly happy to steal from a 12-year-old who thought the world of you." "A bit of money?" Ron scoffed, rolling his eyes. "He's loaded. It's not like he'd miss it." "That's not the point, Ron," Charlie snapped. "I'm sure if anyone had asked, Harry would have given you all the money you needed. He's that kind of person. But to take from him without so much as a word, to pretend to welcome him into the family just to gain access to him." He shook his head, disgusted. "Molly," Arthur began, narrowing his eyes, "is this true?" It was just the money for his school things, and a bit extra. We had an extra mouth to feed after all. I didn't think he'd mind. Albus said it would be fine." "Almost 200 galleons," Bill said suddenly, drawing everyone's attention. "Between Harry starting school and getting the security changed on his vault." Molly's face reddened. Arthur stared at his eldest son. "You knew about this too?" "Harry told us not to tell you," Bill replied. "He wasn't sure if you knew, and if you didn't, he didn't want to cause problems, like Charlie said." "I never should have brought it up," Charlie admitted. "He knew he would have some serious apologizing to do when he got back home. It wasn't mine to share, but you get so high and mighty, Mum, like you're the only one who could possibly have Harry's best interests at heart. You hated Sirius even before we got together, because having him around meant that Harry might not need you as much anymore. And knowing what I know, I can't be sure if that hate comes from genuine care for Harry, or just because you're upset about losing access to the boy who lived and everything that comes with it." And that doesn't even touch on how awful you've been about my relationship, about all our relationships. Bloody hell, Mum. Ginny is going out with Neville Longbottom, and you're still mad about it. He ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head incredulously. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to burst in here and derailing Christmas, he said, grimacing. But I'm done letting you pretend you care so much about Harry's well-being, when, in reality, you only care about what Dumbledore has told you. There's more to that boy than you realize, Charlie, his mother warned, her voice trembling. You'll get hurt if you're not careful. I think I know Harry a hell of a lot better than you do, Mum, he shot back. So you know he's got you-know-who in his head, then? Ron sneered. Or has he turned you as well? Charlie just shook his head sadly. Harry hasn't turned, and neither have I, he said simply. And maybe one day, Ron, you'll grow up enough to understand what real friendship is. It sure as hell isn't reporting your friend's every bloody move to people like Dumbledore. In the chair next to Ron, Hermione let out a tiny gasp. Had she really thought Harry wouldn't figure it out? Charlie turned away, squeezing his dad's shoulder. I'm sorry, Dad. I'll go. I'll walk you out. He didn't say goodbye to the rest of them. He'd see them soon enough anyway. So he let his father guide him back to the door, the man looking decades older than he had when Charlie first arrived. How long have you known? Arthur asked, his voice cracking. About your mother? Charlie replied honestly. Harry told me when I saw him before the first task of the Triwizard, Charlie continued. Arthur sucked in a sharp breath. You should have come to me, son. I couldn't. Harry couldn't. If Dumbledore found out that he knew. Harry had been far too vulnerable for the truth to come out back then. His father looked grim. I've been putting my trust in the wrong man for far too long, haven't I? He realized. Charlie nodded. If it helps, so has everyone else, he said with a shrug. He's very good at being trustworthy. Charlie had trusted him too, until Harry showed him the truth. Arthur gripped Charlie's hand tightly for a moment. Will you give Harry a message for me? Arthur pleaded. Charlie nodded in agreement. Tell him I had no idea about any of it. I'm so sorry for any harm my family may have done him. If he wants recompense— He doesn't, Charlie interrupted quickly, knowing his dad didn't have that kind of money. Still, he would give it up if Harry asked. He doesn't care about the money, not really. It's the lies that hit the hardest. For Harry, the money was just pocket change. The broken trust was what truly hurt. Right, then tell him I'm sorry, and I will deal with Molly. I love him. He's still family no matter what. Arthur's blue eyes softened behind his glasses. You're still family, Charlie. Albus Dumbledore can go hang. Nothing will get between a Weasley and his kids. Charlie grinned and pulled his dad into a tight hug, a few tears escaping his eyes. I love you, Dad, he murmured, feeling Arthur's lips press against his hair, arms squeezing around him. I love you too, son. Always will. When he pulled back, Arthur was grinning. And between you and me, I think Sirius is brilliant, and I'm delighted you two have found happiness together. I always thought about writing to him, but I didn't want to upset Molly. That was his father's only flaw, not wanting to upset his wife. Maybe now he might realize what he stood to lose by standing by her like that. You should. Write, that is, to Sirius and to Harry. He'd like to hear from you. Harry had never said it, but Charlie could tell how terrified he was that Arthur knew about his wife's duplicity and supported it. Given his track record, Charlie couldn't blame him. "I'll do that then," Arthur assured with a decisive nod. "Don't be a stranger, Charlie, even if you need me to meet you somewhere. I'm only an owl away." "I'll remember that. See you, Dad." With one last squeeze on his shoulder, Arthur let his son go. Charlie trudged back toward the edge of the wards. He couldn't go home yet, not after that conversation. He didn't want to disrupt 2 family Christmases with that kind of drama. An idea sparked in his mind. There was one other sibling missing from the Weasley family table. One sibling who was probably busy with something, but would be happy to let him vent about their complicated family. He decided he was going to visit Percy. Draco's fingers gently ran through Harry's hair, and Harry was doing his best to stay awake, reveling in the sensation. This had undoubtedly been the best Christmas he could ever remember. Not that he had many to compare it to, but still. They were all sprawled out in various parts of the living room, filled with food, good cheer, and in some cases significant amounts of alcohol. Even when Charlie had disappeared for 3 hours and returned noticeably drunker, confessing that he had let the cat out of the bag with their mum and passed on an apologetic message from Arthur Weasley, it didn't dampen Harry's spirits. He knew the truth about the family dynamics would come up eventually, and he wasn't too concerned if Dumbledore figured out he was aware of it. He was so close to defeating Voldemort that he didn't need the old man to think he was oblivious to his inheritance or the blocks on his magic. Perhaps he'd care a bit more in the morning when he wasn't quite so tired and blissed out from Christmas, but that was a problem for another time. Right now, the only thing that mattered was Draco's hand in his hair and his head resting comfortably in the blonde's lap. He might have laughed if he had seen Remus and Snape on the other sofa, in almost the exact same position as he and Draco. The werewolf was dozing while Snape's fingers scratched gently at his scalp, a book held in the potions master's free hand. "I think I'm going to call it a night," Harry murmured. "Night," Narcissa sighed, rising gracefully to her feet with a stretch. "It's late, and I'm not as young as I used to be." A few people in the room chuckled. "You're young enough that excuse doesn't hold water," Sirius said playfully. "But go on, head to bed. You might have the right idea. If we wait much longer, we'll be carrying the boys to their rooms." "I'm awake," Harry insisted sleepily, his eyes still closed. He felt, more than heard, Draco chuckle beside him. "Only barely, by the look of you," Narcissa remarked. There was a rustle of fabric, and Harry cracked an eye open just in time to see the blonde woman lean down to kiss her son's forehead and then gently pat Harry's cheek. "Good night, darlings." "Good night, Mother." "Good night, Sissa," Harry murmured, offering a slight smile. Once she left, Sirius let out a big sigh. "Come on then, everyone to bed. There are too many good mattresses in this place for us all to be sleeping on sofas." "Now who's not as young as they used to be?" Draco teased, yelping at the weak tickling charm Sirius sent his way. "Rude." "My godson's a terrible influence on you," Sirius declared. "You never used to be such a mouthy little git." Harry snorted. "That's what you think." "Ow!" Draco poked him in the ribs, jolting him from his pleasantly sleepy state. "Please, you know I love you because you're a mouthy little git, not in spite of it." Draco nudged his leg pointedly until Harry finally dragged himself upright, his glasses askew on his face. Draco's expression softened as he reached out to straighten them, his fingers brushing affectionately against Harry's cheek. It was such an innocent gesture, something he'd done countless times before, but for some reason This time it made Harry's breath catch in his throat. Stunned, it took him a moment to gather his thoughts. "Go on up," Harry murmured, planting a soft kiss on Draco's lips. "I'll help Pads tidy up in here, and I'll meet you in a bit." Draco tilted his head, a curious look crossing his face. They both knew Kerry would take care of the clean-up once everyone had gone to bed. He shook his head with a playful sigh. "Okay, but don't blame me if I'm asleep when you get there." To emphasize his point, he yawned, causing Harry to chuckle. Remus and Snape said their good-nights and made their way out of the room, sleepy but content. Harry took the record off the player, carefully placing it back in its sleeve. "What's up, kiddo?" Sirius asked, appearing at his shoulder, his voice low and eyes filled with concern. Harry glanced around, noticing Charlie was nowhere to be seen either. It seemed he wasn't as subtle as he thought. But that was fine. They probably all assumed he wanted a quiet moment with his godfather on Christmas, which wasn't entirely untrue. Leaning back against Sirius, Harry looked up at him. "I was wondering, would it be safe for us to take a trip to Gringotts sometime before I go back to school?" he asked, watching the confusion flicker across Sirius's face. "Just me and you," he clarified. Sirius considered it for a moment. I don't see why not, yeah. We'd have to time it right, but it's certainly doable." He frowned slightly, one hand moving to ruffle Harry's hair gently. "Anything in particular you wanted to look at?" Harry hesitated, sensing Sirius's concern. "I know things have been a bit jumbled with everyone's family stuff while we figure out how to do the holidays now. If you wanted more Potter-related activities, there's a Hindu celebration they used to do, but that's in mid-January, so you'll be back at school by then." No, it's not that," Harry assured him, making a mental note to revisit the idea of that Hindu celebration later. "I wanted to go to the—" "It's not about the holidays. Everything has been brilliant, honestly," Harry said, gathering the nerves that had been coiling in his belly, along with the words he hadn't realized he'd been bottling up for so long. I don't want Remus to feel left out. I really do want him there. He means as much to me as you do. But I don't want him to keep secrets from Severus, not about this. It's not fair to him." Harry noticed the glint of amusement in Sirius's eyes, the kind that told him he was rambling, and that the older man found it adorable. "I wanted to look at the jewellery in the Potter vault," he blurted out. The amusement faded, replaced by shock. Oh. Sirius's grey eyes widened. "Are you sure, pup? There's no rush for it." Harry snorted quietly. "I don't think he's going to change his mind any time soon." His cheeks burned. "I know, and I'm not saying I'll do it now or even soon, but I want to look." Now that the thought had entered his mind, he couldn't shake it. If he was being completely honest, he'd been thinking about it ever since his birthday party, seeing that ring on Oliver's finger, and how happy it made both him and Cassius. He imagined how perfect Draco's slender fingers would look with a band of silver there. He fully expected Sirius to tell him they were far too young for all that he needed to shelve that thought for at least a couple of years. So he was surprised when the dog Animagus pressed a kiss to his temple, humming softly. "You know, pup, everything else you're your mother's son, no doubt about it. But when it comes to romance, you're Jamie's boy through and through." He chuckled. "You little sop." Harry grinned. "So you'll take me?" he asked, hoping Sirius was as willing to indulge his romantic nature as he had been his father's. "All right then," Sirius agreed. "I'll figure out. It's a good time to sneak off and let you know, and I won't tell anyone, not even Moony," he promised, winking. "Really?" "Like I said, "I don't think he's going to change his mind any time soon," Sirius repeated with a smirk. He nudged Harry's shoulder, encouraging him toward the door. "Go on, go snuggle up with your boy. Dream about putting a ring on his finger next Christmas," he teased, watching as Harry's blush deepened. "Only if you do the same," Harry challenged. Sirius faltered for a moment, then laughed, his gaze turning a bit wistful. "You know what? I just might," he replied, sticking his tongue out playfully. "Sweet dreams, pup. Love you. Love you too." Harry stood on his toes and pressed a kiss to Sirius's stubbled cheek before leaving the room and heading to his bedroom. Maybe he would have those dreams. If he did, it certainly wouldn't be the first time.